7 o'clock. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting of the Rockport Select Board to order Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. Two very quick announcements here. Number one, I'm a Yankees fan, so frankly, I don't care what time we get out of here tonight. Doesn't matter to me.
Oh, okay.
And number two, there's a
Under the
megabucks.
desk here.
There's a megabucks drawing at around 8, so there's a very small chance I'll be leaving the meeting a little bit. Very small
I think it's 1 in
chance.
300 million.
Yeah, something like that. I just wanted to warn people.
My chance is 0 in 300 tickets.
Okay, our first order of business tonight is to call a public hearing to discuss and approve the select board bylaws. And so at this point, I will go ahead and open a public hearing at 7:01. And the first thing I will do is ask, is there anybody in the public who would like to comment in favor of the proposed changes? Seeing none, I will now ask, is there anybody in the public who would like to comment against the proposed changes? And again, we see none. And finally, is there anybody who would like to just comment neither for nor against? And again, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that public hearing at 7:02. And at this point, I will now open the public hearing to give interested members of the public an opportunity to comment on the amendments that we've made to the general assistance ordinance, appendices 8 through D, effective October 1st, 2018. And I'll call that meeting to order at 7:03. Is there anybody at this point that would like to comment in favor of the proposed changes? Seeing none, I'll ask, is there anyone in the public who'd like to comment against the proposed changes? And again, seeing none, is there anyone from the public who'd like to just comment, neither for nor against? Again, seeing none, I'll then adjourn the public hearing at 7:04. And move on to our next item in the agenda here, which is our minutes and meeting announcements. I didn't make any particular notes there. So we'll now move down to the agenda changes. I'll entertain any motions to change the agenda, and I have one of my own if anyone has any comments. Okay. I would propose that we move the wastewater commissioner budget up front, both to accommodate the requestors, and that we also have Scott Bickford here to answer any questions we have. Okay?
No objection. So when would you want to place that?
Well, I guess probably at the start of the new business.
Okay.
That's where I have it here, so is that all right with everyone?
That is.
All right. Now, at this point in the meeting, we'd like to invite anyone from the public to come up and address any issues that are not on the agenda tonight. Do we have anyone here? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to move right to the town manager's report.
I can't keep up.
Yeah, I
You're going
know.
so fast.
Remarkable.
You have in your package the town manager's report, and if there's any it's all printed. If there's any questions on the town manager's report, you feel free. Mark did ask today if I could, which wasn't in my report, if I could give an update on the inflow and infiltration study that we're having done, at the status of that. And I do have some backup on that, if you'd like to hear that. Yeah.
I would, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
As you remember, we've contracted with Dufresne and Henry to do the inflow and infiltration study. They've collected all the pump runtime data for each pump station. They're converting that pump runtime data into actual flow analysis based on the run times. They need specific flow data from each pump, because I think there's 11 or 13 different pump stations, one or the other. And so they need, each pump is slightly different, so they're collecting all the pump flow data now, and they're coordinating a day to have the engineer come here and get the data from each pump station on what the flow is, so they can correlate the flows to the rainfall data. They've also collected and collated all of the rainfall data and matched it to the pump flow data, but it's really early data. It doesn't really, we can't go to the bank on that. So there's little correlation between the run times at the Goose River Station, but there's a definite correlation between the rainfall amounts and the Camden Street flow, the Camden Street Station. So there's an increase in flow on those rain days. What the goal is the next step is to match that data with the individual pumps data, so then we can target in on specific areas of town that may have a higher inflow problem. And our suspicion is that there's one or two areas that have a more significant problem than others. So they're working on that now.
And just so people know why, I think the reason that this is being done is because there appeared to be spikes on rain event days, and that means that there's more flow towards the Camden system, and as they're going to be upgrading their system, the billing will represent our flow into their system. So if we can correct any inaccuracies or problems, the flow will be less, which means we will get charged less, theoretically, unless I'm mistaken.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
We don't want to build the new station.
It's not only for the usage billing, but it's at some point when they decide to do the upgrade, and we're gonna have to pay a portion of that.
Yep.
We wanna make sure that that portion is as accurate as possible.
Based on accurate.
Based on
Yep.
how much we're using the system. So, yeah, it is very important.
I'm navigating my way through here. I'm not a big Apple person. There it is. So one thing I wanted to just take a couple minutes and show to people, and Bruce, if you can pick this up on the screen, hopefully I won't look like a complete fool trying to work this thing. But we did implement the Report It, Fix It program. So it's accessible through our website, and it's right at the top banner of the website, and you just click on that, and that brings you to the Report It, Fix It page. And so it automatically, if you're on your phone, it'll automatically identify where you are on the screen. So it's really easy to report an issue if you see a street light out, or a pot light, or a missing street sign, or whatever the issue is you want to report. You can do that pretty easily from your phone. So just for giggles here, I found everybody's favorite topic, street light that's out on Union Street. So just to show how easy it is to do is, I'm not making it look easy, am I? I thought I'd be able to find where the Y is. Where the, oh,
If you're
the street light,
computer literate,
the street light is there already.
okay.
So somebody's already added it in. So if you see a street light that's out, you could just go to that location with your phone, click on it, and report a problem. So I was hoping to be able to do this, and I can't quite read it. Is that the report a problem place? So you can click on the report a problem piece, and you can just pick a category. So there's a batch of categories there, and you can just scroll down. So in this case, it's a street light, and you'd click on that, and then your phone will automatically pick the location. Or in our case, if we were trying to do it remotely, you would just scroll to the place on the screen, you'd click on that, put the location in, or you can put in a physical address if you'd like. I don't know how to, oh, there it is. And then you report the problem, and if you want email response that the streetlight has been fixed, or that we've gotten notified that the streetlight, that we've got the email okay. You type in your email address someplace here. Down, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, I can't really see it. Oh, here it is. No, yeah,
Keep going down.
keep going down. Yeah, okay, there you go. You've done this before. Oh, is it different on that screen? Yeah. Okay. So if you want to be contacted with an update on the issue, you just click yes, you put in your name, you put in your email address, and automatically a report will get generated as soon as it gets opened up at the Public Works office and gets recognized as a problem. You'll get a response from them by email, and then when it's categorized, you'll get another response. When it's repaired, you'll get once it's closed out, you get another response.
But and also I'd point out for people that get too much email already, you don't have to
You
do
don't
that.
have to do that.
You can just say there's a street light out, say, no, you don't want a response, hit submit, and you're finished.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this case, if you want, you can see all the places that we've gotten reports, and I can't see whether it's reporting every,
Yeah, I looked at it today, 90% of those are, probably 95% of
are
those are
street light,
streetlights
yeah,
out.
yeah. And so we can sort them based on whether it's a street light issue, whether it's a dog complaint, whether it's a pothole, whether it's a street sign problem, whatever those categories, we can sort it. And I think you can do this at home yourself. You can sort it at home and just look at those specific categories. So it's a great feature. People are starting to use it, and they are using it. The good news is they're using it very responsibly. The fear is that people will just start like flooding us with a bunch of, bad reports. But what we've seen is people are being very responsive and very, very responsible with their reporting on the site. So, and it's been very helpful. Now it creates a list for Public Works, and it shows it on a map. So Mike can say, while you're out here, hit this problem, this problem, this problem, get all three of these things at one time. So it's a really nice feature for people in town. So,
Okay, yeah, I have this on my phone. It is so easy to use, really. In 20 seconds, you can report a street sign down, a pothole, street lights out, a dead animal at the side of the road. It's just, and again, the point is here, we all need to be stewards of our own community. Public Works can't do it alone, and everything that we can do, to help them, it's a good thing. So we can take some responsibility making sure the town looks looks good.
it's actually easier on your phone to
Oh,
do
yeah.
it than it is to do it on your computer, because it automatically selects where you are. And if you want to take a picture, you can take a picture also. So if you're having trouble describing what the issue is, a street corner where the edge of the road is eroded away, you're having trouble describing that, you just take a picture, and then Mike can look at the picture and see it. I think it's going to be a very useful tool if people use it. We're using it internally. I've posted a batch of things in here, I think other board members have as well. But it'd be nice to see residents also, particularly like the streetlight one is one that police spend, they do it, is it monthly now we're doing streetlight checks? If we felt like we had a good response from residents, we would not have to have police officers going out there. If residents were pointing out, hey, the streetlight in front of my house is out, that would help us a lot.
Question on using it during a storm situation, like if we had a situation where we were looking at, tree damage occurring around town, would this be a good way to report that, or would
No,
it be better to?
911, a tree down, it may not get seen right away, so you're still better off calling 911 or calling dispatch. It says right in the beginning at the top, if this is an emergency, do not report an emergency on this. So a tree down blocking the road, that's, it shouldn't be reported on that, because it may be hours in between when somebody sees it.
I just didn't know whether during those
That's a
events
good-
that people would be monitoring that, and that would be an easier way to report that or not. but
Well,
it's-
that's a good question,
good information.
thank you. That's an excellent question.
Other town manager
Nope.
report item? I have a question, or not a question, but rather a comment under the planning section here, and Deborah can comment on this too, but, more and more I'm seeing discussions about broadband in the various town committees and whatnot, and, I just want to be very clear that I personally understand that several years ago, this broadband initiative was voted down by the people. I get that. But that was in a different era, and things have changed substantially in how services are delivered and the benefits that they have. And so, for all those people out there that want to start writing me a letter and say, oh, we've already voted on this, well, I'm sorry, the landscape is changing, and I'm perfectly willing, and I'm open to people in the town, if reasonable people want to explore this issue and reevaluate it, and then come back to the town and try to sell their case, I'm perfectly open to doing that. I voted against it before, but again, part of our job is to listen to any new proposals, how things have changed, and then act on what we think is best for the town. So don't send me the letters now. This is just part of good governance. Again, listening to new information as it comes out. Is that a fair judgment?
Yeah, it is,
Statement?
and I would say that, in particular, that a few years ago, when this was brought to the voters, and there was a request for several $100,000 to engage in a study, that's what was voted down. I mean, it wasn't, and so, as Doug says, a lot has changed in that period of time. We now have certain funding mechanisms that might be available to the town to actually pursue a broadband infrastructure, which wouldn't raise taxes. And I think during the candidates forum before I was elected, and every time I've talked about this, I have stressed the fact that I know that people are being stressed with, increased taxes for schools, for, other items in town. And so I think that everybody who's talking about this, at least from the town perspective, is keenly aware of the idea that this needs to be something that doesn't raise taxes. But I think it makes a lot of sense for us to pursue it, or to pursue discussions about it in that way. And in fact, we had a meeting today with some folks on potential financial structuring of it in that regard. And Callis and Baileyville, for example, are doing it through a regional utility district, and they are not raising taxes, and they are building a broadband infrastructure.
And I would chime in, I voted for it the last time around, but in 2020 hindsight, I'm glad it didn't pass at the
Yes,
time, because
right.
we could spend the same money now and get an awful lot more for it, because, as
Absolutely.
both Doug and Deborah said, the landscape has changed dramatically. And I think the other thing that's changed is that a lot more towns are doing it now, and so for Rockport to not fall behind and to want to be part of the technology economy, we really have to explore these options. One of the things that the board, when I was on the last time, that the board insisted on, and I will insist again, is that as we explore these initiatives, we have to explore them with the idea that the entire town would be served. That's really, really important, because for folks who don't live in, what might be called a preferred area of town, we want everybody to be able to get that service. It's really
Right.
important that we do that.
And so we're having discussion, we're basically in a fact-finding mode right now, and when it's appropriate, we'll bring the issue to the select board and to the public for open discussion. But we want to get our facts straight and our options, available options, understand those first.
Anybody else have any questions of Rick on the manager's report?
I do. I just wanted to get some more details on the generator situation. Your report talks about the fact that the bids came in a lot higher, almost twice what we budgeted.
Just about.
And then you know, your last sentence said we could cut back and use a generator that was smaller and whatever. I wondered where are we with that possibility and how much less of a generator and have we explored that yet?
Yeah, we're in the process of exploring that now between the engineer and the apparent low bidder, to try and get a generator that will operate the town at the level we need for an emergency service. One of the things is the generator as designed is designed to run all of the functions of the town completely. So all of the lights on, all of the computers running, the AC running in the summertime, which if it's an emergency, we don't need the AC running. So there's a batch of things that we can do. If it's an emergency, we're not gonna be, town office operations are not gonna be running exactly like they do every day. There's gonna, you know, there's gonna be some functions of the town office that are gonna need to work, but everything isn't gonna be working like it does today. So, the thinking is that we can reduce the cost, by getting a smaller generator. As Mike said, the engine on a 55,000 kilowatt generator is just the engine piece alone is $30,000. So, you know, so if we can get the generator down to a smaller, I think the thinking is we can get down to about a 25 kilowatt generator.
I mean, personally, I would rather have you have what is needed. And if we have to encumber the money that's there this year and put a little more in next year, maybe it's another year before we get it, but I would rather have something sufficient than try to make it fit just because we don't have the extra money.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to you, and we can do either thing. It's just, you know, for an emergency generator, do we need to run, will we be running the town office exactly like we're running it now?
Well, I guess, you know, the whole point is that
I mean, we can,
you asked for what you asked for because you believe that's what you needed.
yeah,
And so why go backwards? And I know it might be, Randy might be shaking his head that I might be thinking about spending money, but it's a worthy cause. You know, it's a worthy project, and I don't think we should shortchange our,
I don't think we should shortchange our needs either, but I think anytime a bid comes in that much over, it behooves us to re-examine it and take a look at what can we accomplish what we need to accomplish with. I wouldn't advocate for putting something in that doesn't serve the need, but maybe we reassess the need is all.
Right.
And I think that's a worthwhile exercise, and maybe in the end, we come back and say, well, it's still gonna be, we're only gonna save $10,000, why don't we wait till next year, as you suggested, and encumber the money with it, but I think the exercise is worthwhile.
Yeah, I'll weigh in too. I'd made a note, but I was gonna let it drop. But as you folks know, I've been a big advocate of this generator, and was one of the driving forces behind getting it on our budget. And it's been frustrating for me that this was approved in June at the budget. You know, and we knew that the fall and the ice storm season was coming. And you know, now at this late date, well, we're under budgeted. You know, there's gonna be a big storm this weekend potentially. So I guess it's just part of the frustration of government, but, you know, it seems like it's taken a long time to get a fairly critical piece of equipment so that the town can serve its citizens, which is why we're all here to begin with. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Other items, Doug, for the manager's report? Yeah, just, Rick, some follow-up from an earlier meeting. You're going to talk to Abby about mooring length and scope, pennant length, as we talked about swing room in the harbor. Is there any update on that?
that would go back to the harbor committee to,
Okay.
I mean, I brought that up to her, we talked about
Right.
that.
So that part's done. We also had a conversation at an earlier meeting around revising or looking at the Harbor Park fee schedule.
Right, and
And,
that's
get-
working through.
formalize the tent size.
Yep, that's working through.
Good.
It's working through the Parks and the Harbor Committee now.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, there was one more, Ken. You were gonna talk to the folks that did Andre about the quote on the outlet.
Legacy.
Yeah. You get a quote, and you were gonna take it back to that committee.
What was the quote? Is
I
it,
guess I didn't see the, I mean, Legacy Rock, I missed the last Legacy Rockport meeting because I was
right.
out of
Alright,
town. But then I know they have money there, and I suspect, I didn't
Yep.
see the quote,
I think
so.
the action item was you were gonna get a hold of them and let them know what the quote was.
Right, and I didn't see the quote, so, but anyway, I will do that
All right,
for,
excellent.
the next time I have,
Thanks.
meet with that group. And I know that there's money there, and I'm sure that they'll be well willing to spend it on that.
For people in the audience or at home, there's an electrical pedestal down next to Andre that both the Parks Committee and the Rockport Garden Club, I think, feel is very unsightly there. There's been a request to have that moved to a more appropriate location. And Ken's going to be talking to Rockport Legacy if they could help fund the approximately $1,000 to relocate it.
Could, Rick, do you have that quote? If you do, could you email it to me?
I don't have it. Abby or Mike do.
Okay. Yeah, if you could email it to me, then that will remind me to do it. Thank you.
I had a question on the library. I just needed a little clarification here. It said in your manager's report, Rick, that the library staff is working with the high school, again, to keep the school library open after school and get kids to use the Rockport Public Library.
Yeah,
I
the-
didn't quite understand
Yeah, the
that.
goal is, it's two parts to it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, he's in the audience. But we keep we're there one day a week, and Camden's there too? Yep. And it's for us, we go in and keep the library open at the high school for an hour a day, is it, or 2 hours?
It's 1 hour, it's from 3:30 to
4:30, so that the library in the afternoon is open 3 days a week. And the goal is to make the connection between the students and our library, so that they have a connection between being in school and our librarians, so that they feel like they're comfortable and they want to come to our library because something might be happening there.
Is that being done by Ben or a member of the staff?
I think it's,
It's all of us.
yeah.
Okay, so
We
you,
rotate through, so not everybody has to go every
Okay.
day, and then they can meet all of us. It was actually, Iris, the high school librarian, is the driving force behind that.
And this is the second or third year we're doing
It's
it?
the second.
And pardon me for getting in the weeds, but I noticed that you talked about a virtual reality class, teaching an iPhone class. And that just made me think, do you do any iPhone classes for seniors at the library? That would be a
That's what it
great,
was.
oh, okay,
That's what it
great.
was. It's through the Adult
Excellent.
Ed.
All right,
Yeah.
so for seniors.
Well.
No, I
Anybody.
mean seniors, white hair seniors,
yeah,
not high
it's-
school
it's for
seniors.
beginners, is what it's for, and there'll be another one coming up next month.
Great, great, thank you. Yeah, I think so many people would love to,
They're normally full.
yeah, great, thank you.
Any other questions for this very important topic?
we've almost reached our 20 minutes, haven't we?
Pretty damn close.
Good timing.
Right doing there. Okay, next, for the first time, is our consent agenda. I think I may have made a technical error by asking about agenda changes. That would have been the appropriate time to have someone pull it out, but we're still in a learning curve. So at this point, I guess I would ask, is there anything here that anyone wants to pull out for discussion more in depth? I would ask Deborah, that we've had another committee resignation, Heaven Bartlett from the Budget Committee, which would be part of this committee resignations. I mean, is it appropriate to just add that on as part of this agenda at this
We
point?
do that
or-
next time.
Yeah,
What's the protocol,
It-
because it's,
I would think you'd want to do it the next
Yeah, so
next
that way
meeting.
we'd
I mean, you
have
can
to-
announce it, you can
Okay.
announce it and encourage people. Now we have 3 openings.
Yes,
But formally, I think it should come up on the next agenda.
okay. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Will that motion have discussion or no?
Sure.
I'm trying to, okay. I just-
Well,
I think there's a motion, a second, and then allowing conversation.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
All right,
trying
let
to
me-
figure
Yeah,
out this new
right.
consent
Let me,
agenda.
Right.
let me motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented in our notes.
Okay, second?
I'll second it.
All right, and any discussion, Ken? Do you want to pull something out?
I don't want to pull something out necessarily, but I just want to have a chance to comment on the committee resignations and to be able to sort of thank people in public for their service and things like that. So
Sure.
I want to make sure that we can do that under this consent agenda priority without having to pull it off the agenda or whatever. Like I say,
yeah.
I'm learning how to do this.
Right,
and I'm
You,
willing to
you,
learn, but
you could do that by just reading the items D and E on the consent agenda. And, you know, the chair could add that comment or the,
Okay. Yeah, I just want to, I don't want to bury this because, you know, in terms of John Alexander, who was on a planning board for 9 years, he spent a lot of time, he took it very, very seriously, and sometimes he disagreed with people about things, but he really dove in, I think, head and shoulders with his taking that responsibility very seriously, and I think it's totally appropriate to thank him publicly for his years of service. And also for the committee resignations, we're looking at some people who served for a long time. Tim Hoffman on the Harbor Committee, was on that committee for a large number of years and is leaving town, so I'd like to say thank you to him publicly, and also to Tony Bates, who's on the Board of Assessment Review for a very long time. And Chris Farley, a shorter period of time on the Budget Committee, but took that responsibility very seriously as well.
And while we're thanking people, I'd like to make one comment that we've done a lot of work on the vehicle use policy, as you know, and I'd like to thank Bob Hall, who has donated his legal time, and not legal time, I mean, obviously, he's a lawyer, but it's really his insurance expertise to helping out with sorting through some of the insurance issues. And he remains happy to assist us on, you know, on other insurance matters such as that.
Well,
So-
I had a note here, since this is the Mutual Admiration League.
Yes.
To thank Deborah, Diane, and Linda for the work that was done on the vehicle use policy and the general assistance. It was just yeoman's job.
People willing to dive into minutia and make it right are a strength.
So is there any other discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda? All opposed? None. It's unanimous. Okay. We have no unfinished business. We are now going to go to the new business, and we'll actually, first on the agenda here is the wastewater commissioners. So I think we need to have a motion to exit select board and go into the wastewater commissioner mode here.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, I'm trying to find my colored sticky here, but basically, this is a concept that the Hotel Strawberry Hill down on Powerhouse Hill, the owners have several house lots. The owners of Strawberry Hill also have several house lots. They are looking to be able to pump the sewage from, or not pump, well, possibly pump, but to get the sewage from those two house lots into the pump station for Strawberry Hill, and then thence up to the sewer system. We have Scott Bickford here tonight to, Scott, do you want to just give us a brief, more technical overview of what I just said? And then we can go from there.
I'll try. I'm Scott Bickford, your code officer and plumbing inspector. Mr. Burton and Mr. Thompson have a lot of land between the Water and Commercial Street down below Strawberry Hill Motel. And what they would like to do is develop the lot of land they have, which is big enough to hold 2 residences. And it's big enough to put septic systems on, but it's pretty expensive to do that. What they would like to do is to pump that partway to Route 1, up onto the Strawberry Hill property that they own. Now, these properties are not owned under the same ownerships. So because of that, they'd have to have an easement to do that. And once it got to Strawberry Hill, it would repump the Strawberry Hills pump to Route 1. Each home would have its own separate pump. They would be pumping solids up to Strawberry Hills container. And that's the basic.
So right,
Questions?
if I could, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
please do.
Right now, the lot, I assume by different ownership, you mean different legal entities, but it's
Yes.
the same people basically that own it.
I would defer that to Dana Burton, who's here.
And as I read your memo, the concern really is what happens if at a later time, the ownership of the lots becomes different? And you have,
That is my only real concern, and I think no matter how this goes, if the board is in favor of this, we'd send the easement to our town attorney to protect any future owners and make sure the easement looks proper.
The maintenance and ownership of this line and
I think
equipment?
that'd be very important to be in the easement. I would think the property owners that's gonna be developed would take the responsibility in that easement up to that receiving tank.
They would have to.
But once again, with that language, would have to be in the easement. Because the property could always be divided other ways.
Correct.
And would have to foresee that to protect any future owners of Strawberry Hill or the lot in question.
Well, I know that our sewer ordinance allows for the backlot connections, and this is a little bit more of a complicated case, but I find the memo that Scott has written very thorough, and it seems to make a lot of sense to me, having worked with this sewer ordinance for,
We love it, don't we?
oh, yeah.
Every time we do
And,
the
and
ordinance.
environmentally, it makes a lot more sense than to have a new septic system designed, especially there where who knows where if the septic system fail, where's it gonna go? It's gonna go in the bay.
Exactly.
And so to me, it makes all the sense in the world, as long as we, as Scott is suggesting, dot all the i's and cross all the t's with the easements. This makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah, I'm there with Ken. You know, my 2 points are maintenance of the line from the home up, all the way to the receiving tank, has to be in the easement, and then any property owners, now or in the future, they would own the property that the easement goes through, need to be protected so that if, for example, things go afoul, it's not them that's maintaining, but the homeowners that are pumping it to begin with.
Exactly, and I might add to that, I think probably it should be clear on how the sewer bill gets paid. So we don't get caught holding the sewer bill, not knowing who's responsible. I think all of that can be done in the easement.
Scott, is that something you'll be responsible for vetting the easement before it comes back to us to make sure these are included? I mean, who's the point person for the town?
I would think that I would talk to the attorney and
Go
let
through
him
town
know
council.
what your desires are.
Well, who transmits to him our concern?
It would go through Scott.
I would do that for you.
Okay.
Linda will relay all this to me. And you can either have it back again, or you can take your vote contingent upon, and I can follow that up any way you want to.
I think we should do it contingent upon to avoid having
I think
this
that's what
come
our
up.
motion
Yeah.
says.
Yeah, the motion, and I'll make the motion at
Yeah.
this point, actually. I move to support the proposed indirect sewer line as proposed, and for the administration, meaning Scott and Rick, to come back to the commissioners at a later date with an easement and other language for final approval by the commissioners.
There's a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Burton, do you want to add anything to the discussion? Okay. Scott, I always want to thank you for your expertise on this, and Ken, I really appreciate your backup too. This is a complicated issue, and
Ken and I have had a
appreciate the
great
work you
time
guys
playing
do
with the
for
sewer.
it. All right, so
Going there.
all in favor of the motion? It's unanimous? Okay, thank you.
I move to exit as wastewater commissioners, return as select board.
Second?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor? Yes. Okay, let me just catch up here for a minute. Okay, all right, so first thing we need to do here under new business is think about changing our December 10th select board meeting to December 3rd and tie it in with our internal control policy workshop. I think some of this is to accommodate Rick's
My vacation.
Okay. I think historically, we've always done this. is there a motion or?
I
a-
move to change the December 10th Select Board meeting to December 3rd, after the internal control workshop.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just say, we've
Just a
done this
minute.
over the.
Any discussion?
How come, I mean, this could have been included in the consent agenda, couldn't it?
Well,
Well, you hadn't had a chance.
I think the difference is that while we've done this over the last several years, we have new board members who may not
Yeah.
have been aware of it.
But it's pretty administrative and
Yeah.
not very substantive, so
Yeah.
it could have been. I agree with Mark.
we have two committee applicants.
Voted.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Voted.
yeah, all
Yeah.
in favor of that?
Right.
Thank you. Okay, it's unanimous. Two committee applications are in your packet here. We have Joyce Moore. Yes,
I'm
for
looking
the,
right at her.
for the Capital Improvement Committee. She actually attended our last Capital Improvement
Sorry.
Committee to get a feel for what we do. You want to just step to the podium for a moment and maybe just tell us a thing or two about yourself?
Thank you very much for entertaining my application. My name is Joyce Moore, and I kind of grew up mid-coast, went away, and I've been back for about 3 years. And I have Taxes Plus as a business. I'm an enrolled agent and very excited to be in the community as an adult. And so I enjoyed my first informal meeting, and I do hope you'll all support me to be on this committee.
Thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions of Joyce while she's there? We have a
I
letter.
did that one time.
Look
applied
where
for a
you are now.
committee,
Yes,
and look what happened.
Yeah.
I know, I see that.
Yeah, I did that too, so there's a history.
Yeah.
That's the right path.
I'll be very careful of that.
It's a good path to take.
We have a letter in our packet from Alan Mitchell, chairman of that committee, recommending her, so I'll entertain a motion.
I motion that we accept Joyce as a capital improvement committee member.
Second.
Do we have a
Yeah.
term expiration date on that?
Do we, did that get in there?
Well, I didn't see it, to be honest.
Lifetime appointment.
Well, it would be 3 years.
Says for term of June 30th, 2021 in your motion.
Okay. yeah,
So,
there it is.
so
Okay.
that,
The motion. Yeah, that's what I heard when the motion was made, June 30th, 2021.
Okay.
Is that 2021 or
apologies.
2031?
2020.
21, nice try.
Okay. All in favor? And it is unanimous.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
willing to
Yes,
serve.
much
That's an important
appreciated.
committee.
Interested in the Budget Committee?
Next, we have Sadie Samuels' application for the Harbor Committee, and in our packet, we have a letter from Abby supporting their application. Yes, here she comes. Step right up to the microphone. Thank you for coming tonight, appreciate it. So, you lobster on the harbor. Well, tell us a little bit about that, how long you been doing it for, and,
I've been pretty much fishing in Rockport Harbor my whole life. I've had a student, well, I had a student license when I was 7, and then I've had a commercial license since I was 14. Now I'm 27, so I'm the youngest full-time commercial fisherman in the harbor. And I just feel like it's important for me to be involved and know what's going on, so I can kind of talk to everyone down there and kind of keep everyone informed.
I think that's absolutely wonderful, and it's just great to see, you know, young people such as yourself and Joyce to be involved with our town. Does anyone have any questions for Sadie?
Do you have a special area of interest that you want to help shepherd along, or?
I think in, I guess, the past couple years, there have been a few times where some of the fishermen have been kind of like, oh, we just didn't really know kind of what was going on in a few situations, and I feel like it would just kind of foster a little more, like, peace, I guess, you know, with everyone, just to have kind of like, also, I like this kind of stuff, and I get along with all of them, and a lot of them don't really understand this kind of stuff, so it's good to just, I don't know, yeah.
I'd like to motion that Sadie be appointed to the Harbor Committee as a committee member.
Great,
Second.
yes. All
For
in favor?
term,
No,
a term
June
of
30th.
June
2031. I'm going for that 2031.
Well, I hope to be
30th
here
of
forever,
2020.
so
I
thank
just
you.
want to comment, I think it's wonderful, as Doug said, that we have somebody, a working lobsterman, a young working lobsterman, somebody who's really excited about the work of the committee, and I think that's terrific. I think it's really going to be a great addition to the committee.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
That's great, thank you. You're first and second.
Second, and all in favor?
Yeah, we did that.
Okay. Wonderful, great, thank you. Our next agenda item is to appoint our animal control officer, and I would ask Randy to just step up here and say a few words.
I can vouch for Sadie's lobster abilities. She bought my lobster boat. Her dad bought it when she was just a kid, and then she got a bigger boat, and I bought my old boat back, so.
Sounds like poor judgment.
A little taller. Well, good evening. I'm here to introduce Scott Entwistle as our next animal control officer. Scott joined the Camden Police Department as our parking enforcement officer back in July. I drafted him from the communications center. It cost me several lunches to get Wally Tower to speak to me again, but we're all back on good terms. Scott was unique because he started working in the harbor area of Camden when he was, 5 or 6? So he comes to us with a lot of certifications. So Chris Farley and I, thinking together, instead of just a parking enforcement officer, we're going to use Scott as a public safety utility person. Scott has certifications, they're numerous, so he's a public safety dispatcher certification. He is a certified advanced harbor master. Keep going with him. He's a licensed boat captain. He does
1,000
things
ton is
with
it, Sparky?
trains. He is firefighter 1 and 2 certified and fire officer certified. So what we plan on doing is using Scott, and he just received his animal control officer certificate last Friday. So in Camden, we're going to use him when we need him. If Chris needs him to run a fire truck when he doesn't have enough people, he can run that fire truck. He'll do the parking enforcement for both towns, do the animal control. I can use him. Jeff Sukeforth, my administrative assistant's on vacation for 2 weeks. Scott's filling in there. So very good selection for us, and will work out great for both towns.
Sounds like a
It's
valued
fantastic.
employee.
Yeah.
I move to
Absolutely.
appoint Scott Entwistle as Camden, Animal Control Officer for the town of Rockport.
I second.
Any further discussion? You
Plays
want to
good
say a
jazz
few
music
words?
too, a long time ago with my son,
Oh, really? Oh, geez.
back in the high school days, you know.
Scott, do you want to say anything before
Step
we
right up.
vote? So,
Well, just wanted to say my door's always open for anyone that has any questions, comments, suggestions, and
I'll bring my dogs over.
glad for the opportunity, so, thank you guys.
well, thank you very much for
Thank
looking
you.
into it. All in favor?
Mark's
Thank you
spending
both.
money, I'm saving money, giving him more positions to do it, paying him for one.
Yeah, what's the world coming to?
Tell you what, good to see you though, Mark.
I know.
All right, we have two special, harbor special exceptions, and is Abby here in the audience? Yeah, Abby, do you want to come up and just help lead us through the discussion? One has to do a special exception to the mooring for Kenny Dodge and his 47-foot boat. You want to just tell us briefly the process you went through and where we are?
Sure. It's been ongoing, this has been an ongoing issue for probably, off the cuff, I'd say about 2 years. Kenny, the harbor ordinance states that nothing in the inner harbor can be bigger than 40 feet long. Kenny built himself a new boat, great new boat.
Beautiful.
But that happened to be all of 47 feet long. So it was against the ordinance. He came to a few harbor committee meetings before the boat was launched to discuss what might happen in that regard, knowing that he'd be in violation if he put the boat on the mooring. He did hire an attorney. The attorney, we went back and forth, and if I'm just, this is all from memory at the moment, and he launched the boat in June of 2016, so this is the second time. He was then served with a notice of violation from the town stating that he had until the June vote in the thought that until they began to get fined, which is a per day fine, which is quite hefty. In the thought that if we could get something on the ballot, he could, sorry, I'm all over the place. So we ended up getting the ordinance changed not changed, but and special exceptions to allow it. So we put our heads together and tried to find a way to accommodate something, not just this particular issue, but anything that was in violation of the ordinance that could be fixed. Like if you have a house that's not conforming, you can get a variance or a special exception. So we kind of took that model and went with it. That got put before the voters in June. So Kenny spent 2 seasons, on the mooring in violation of the size ordinance. It was not a hazard to navigation. It wasn't impeding any other boats on the mooring, and it fit where it was. If it had been a hazard to navigation, or was hitting another boat or another mooring, that would have been a separate issue, and it would have been moved right away. Chose to go the sort of litigation with counsel from our lawyer and the town manager for how to proceed with it. So here we are now, having gotten approved. The voters approved the special exception. Kenny applied for a special exception. The Harbor Committee reviewed it. I gave findings of fact. They made their, not ruling, but recommendation to you all, and here we are.
And here we are.
Yep.
Okay, and I'll note that in our packet, we have a letter from Sam Temple, who's chairman of the Harbor Committee, and he recommends our approving this. He does add the caveat that he thinks both the Harbor Committee and the Select Board were a little bit soft on enforcing the regulation and enforcing the penalties, let's put it that way. And I guess I have to take some of the blame for that, because I think I was the one that sort of voted to not do the penalties and just sort of let this process go forward. But, in retrospect, I think we could have taken, as a select board, a much harder line. And just to those people that are listening out there, in the future, I think we should, and I will. So, any questions?
Abby, what was the vote of the Harbor Committee on that, on their recommendation?
It was unanimous, I think, 4-0.
This is before my time on the select board, but, I heard about it in town and, and kicking around. And I do think that the select board should be taking a harder line on this kind of thing. I mean, we have ordinances for a reason, and they're to be complied with. And I don't think that we would expect that in the, with police department related stuff. We should expect it with the harbor. And anyway, so I would say that during my term on this board, I do intend to take a harder line with respect to violations of ordinances.
And I'll say that I just don't like the way this smells, to put it bluntly. I didn't from the beginning, and I don't now. This situation came about, this applicant willfully violated the ordinance, knew the ordinance was in place, willfully violated it, and I think his attorney at one point said, well, just go ahead and do it and the town will fix it anyway. And that attitude really bothered me. We went through the process, and one of the reasons we sort of waylaid the Friends is that the Harbor Committee went through a very difficult discussion of how to deal with these special exceptions, and came up with something that they thought was workable. Initially, the Harbor Committee was far from unanimous on this issue, and I think, Jeff, maybe you were present for some of those discussions. It became, they were able to craft something that they could all get behind, and so I will vote for this motion this evening, but I have to tell you, the whole process leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, there's nothing that says we have to approve it either.
No, like I said, we have a unanimous recommendation from the Harbor Committee right now, from the Harbor Master, and I think, in my opinion, it's best to move this forward. I don't think at this time, it's not gonna serve the town well to vote this down and then basically enter into litigation, which is where this would go, I'm sure. But like I say, I found the attitude of the applicant less than ideal from the beginning of this process, and I'll just leave it there.
Anybody else like to weigh
Yeah,
in?
I'll weigh in. In the end, there were learnings, I think, for many in this process. Certainly around enforcement of ordinances, we could do the hindsight and say, maybe we should have done something different. On the flip side, the ordinance did not allow for any exceptions to the ordinance. There was no application for any exception as there is in any land use type ordinance. And so the win-win situation out of this was create an exception policy and an application process. The review of the application requires that 3 different criteria be evaluated prior to the harbor master making a recommendation, yea or nay. And they're all, associated with proximity to surrounding moorings, hazards to navigation, and those types of things. And, when you do that review, the current situation, again, I'm not talking about history, I'm talking, the current situation says that boat is not causing issues with navigation or proximity. The pennant on it was shortened up, and it made a difference. And in the spirit of moving forward, I am in support of granting this exception.
Mark, do you wanna?
No, I mean, that's what Jeff had said. I mean, there were things that they were not the same throughout some of the policies, whether it's land use with exceptions, and through this process, that was found, it was corrected, and the people that need to be happy are happy, meaning the harbor committee and the harbor master, and I am, so.
It was corrected, but it should have been corrected before the violating boat was put in the harbor.
Somebody dodged a bullet. Okay, is there a motion?
No pun intended.
No pun.
Sorry.
Is there a motion to approve this special exception?
I move to approve the special exception to section 506 of the harbor ordinance to allow Kenneth Dodge to keep his boat on his mooring in the inner harbor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? It's unanimous. Our next request for special exception is from the company Mainly Lobster, who does lobstering down on the town landing there. Abby, do you want to briefly?
Sure. Scott had, at the beginning of the season, mentioned that the crates that they like to store on the float itself, so they store in the lobster crate. So there was some discussion of what that actually was, but a lobster crate is just what the fishermen take their lobsters out of and put into when they come in. So that's what they've been bring them up and weigh them and take them away from there. So Scott would store them on the dock, and it says in the ordinance that it can only be one tide cycle. Gear can only be stored on the dock for one tide cycle, and that became cumbersome, and they would need to be stored somewhere else. So, he asked my permission, and I said, well, I can't give you that permission, but you can, now we have a special exception policy, so go that route, and he has, and, I have no issue with it, and we have a decent working relationship, so that if it's a bad weather event or something, I can go over and say, hey, let's get those off the dock, and he'll be compliant. So I'm happy with that.
This one was done by the book. It's a reasonable request. Obviously, if stack height becomes an issue between Scott and Abby, they'll get it resolved. The concern obviously is height of, these crates, because you can only put so many crates on a dock, and a float. They've got a good plan. It was done well.
In the interest of transparency, we do need to point out that Scott is on our harbor committee, a valued member of our harbor committee.
And recused himself from this
And I would-
particular, yeah.
As the liaison, I was present and watched him recuse himself of any discussion during that,
Yep.
anytime this was discussed or considered.
Just for transparency. Okay, do we?
One
Yeah.
question, and that's, if we approve this special exception, and then in the future, a different company, let's say that Scott sells his company to somebody else or whatever, would the exception run with that, or would the new person have to apply for a new exception?
The applicant is only for mainly lobster and seafood.
Yeah, I would say they would have to
I just want to make
apply
it clear,
again.
that because right now, it sounds like there's a great relationship between Scott and the town, and this makes all the sense in the world to me. It's, I have no problem at all with it, but I wanted to make sure if something changed, if we grant that special exception and we get a different entity in there running it, that.
They would have to
we would
reapply.
They're not grandfathered.
Yeah.
Nope.
My assumption is they are not grandfathered. Now, then we get into the, okay, land use ordinance, and you have an exception granted, ownership changes, what happens?
Yeah, and under land use, the special exception runs with the land.
Well, the.
But
a
if it's
special
a- if it's a
exception
change in
land
use, then
use
it's
is
different.
because it's
Yeah.
a special exception is something where you're building a house that doesn't,
I
or
like
some
that.
sort of
I
structure
like
that
that
doesn't
answer.
conform.
I'm good.
So it's a little bit of a different animal.
Does someone want to make the motion?
I motion that we accept the special exception to the harbor ordinance as presented by Mainly Lobster and recommended by the harbor master.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Once again, it's unanimous. And Abby, thank you for the job you do also. We appreciate it very much. Next on the agenda is a capital campaign report, and we have John Veman here to bring us up to date on
Also, Ann and,
oh, and Ann in the back. Ann, come on up here. Please, I want you to come up and share in the glory. Ann is president of the foundation, so it's important that we recognize her.
Thank you. I'm not exactly sure how much information everybody wants here, but
15 minutes at the most.
15 minutes, okay. Well, I can actually give you just the headline, which is, as of today, $1,018,699 is what we've been able to get firm pledges for in less than 3 months.
That is great.
And this is key information for the voters because this will be our
Absolutely.
last meeting before the election on November 6th. And so this is an important piece of information for the voters, knowing that that private money is coming in and that they can vote with confidence that the private money. And I guess I'll ask you also, how do you feel about meeting the $2 million goal by let's say, the spring construction season or something of that nature?
I think we're all very optimistic. I mean, we've had a very, very positive response from the community. We've been mostly in the quiet phase of this campaign, so we really haven't begun that more aggressive public phase of the fundraising. I think there's a number of fairly significant donors of significant capacity that are anxious for the vote, and we're looking very, very much forward to that. The first phase of our campaign, as far as the marketing, or if you will, publicity side of it, has been to generate a very positive vote, because we felt that would kind of turbocharge, that next, the next $1 million. But, we're asking about crystal ball and all that sort of thing. So I can tell you that right now, based on, I think I can speak for the whole team, and it is a great team. We've got everybody engaged and we're all working hard. We're feeling very confident that we can make our goal. And presumably, we'd like to be here in a year and say we've exceeded it. So,
John, it's sort of my understanding, too, that you've been in the quiet phase now, which sort of by definition identifies a fairly small number of donors. But as we go forward, we're going to want to take the ask out to more and more people in the community, and that's going to require some manpower.
Yep.
So do we want to appeal to the citizens of Rockport, if you have an interest in helping with this, to contact John? to volunteer your services. It may be canvassing, it may be helping with spreadsheets, it may help with sending out letters. So there's a lot of back office things to do, and, you know, not necessarily having to go out and ask for money, but just a lot of administrative effort to support the work that you folks are going to be doing, we hope, in the near future.
Yeah, there is a fair bit of administrative, you know, just general kind of all hands on deck kind of work that's involved with something of this nature. You know, I think we've been through a lot of the heavy lifting so far. We've had 3 direct mail campaigns. We've been putting up a few signs. You may see one in front of the podium here. Not that I'm lobbying for anything, but we've had a very ambitious social media campaign that's been ongoing, kind of keeping, you know, people aware in every place we can of what, you know, that this vote is very important coming up, and you know, this is a big moment for making a library a reality, a new library a reality in town. We've had a good amount of publicity around it. We've had a good, consistent drumbeat with a lot of people in the community have been, including the select board, thank you very much, have written a letter to the editor, and we're getting the word out. You might have noticed the mural got up since we last met. And we've recently added lighting to it, so it can be enjoyed 24
Speaking-
hours a day.
While I have you
Speaking of
here, Mark, do you want to?
I was approached today by someone who noticed that the lights are on 24/7, and it should be on a timer. I mean, I assume that the town is
There is
spending
a-
the money for the electricity, so
Yeah,
I'm going back to my frugal mode.
Yep. I requested a timer be installed, and it's, my understanding is it's on its way. So
Perfect.
I was expecting it to be installed by now. I had the same reaction. I started, you know, watching the meter at
We could
first
always
day.
get Randy to have one of the guys go plug it in. Shows up nice during the day.
Yeah. On your way out, can you unplug it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for, go ahead. Ken,
I was
you
just
had
going to make
something.
a comment that, to thank John and Ann and the rest of the members of the board of the Rockport Library Foundation, and to make sure that the public understands that this is a private foundation, that no town resources are being used for this, and these folks are volunteering their time and looking at the amount of work you folks have done. That's a huge volunteer commitment on behalf of the library question, so.
People have been working very hard, and we appreciate your thanks.
It's, you know, I know that Joan has, I've talked to Joan several times, and I know Peter was, when we first started with it, he was very enthusiastic, and Kate Monroe is, of course, a great addition. You guys, you really have the dream team doing this. and I
Well,
think-
one of the key members has been Bill Leone. who's
Yeah,
what I was
Bill
gonna say.
Leone
Bill
as well.
Leone's
and,
wonderful
You know,
leader.
Doug and I approached Bill pretty early in the game and twisted his arm a little bit, and it's, I didn't mean to leave Bill out by any means, but.
No.
But I think, you know, this is the culmination of a long conversation that we've had in the town about the library, and I think that we're at the point now where we're ready to conclude that conversation in a very positive way, and you guys are a big part of that, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
If I might, I think one of the things that's made it so successful is the fact that people who had differing opinions about the previous option have worked together to try, have settled those differences and have tried to work together to get this done, which is kind of a unique position in today's world.
Yeah, that's
That
for
you have,
sure.
you have people that you know, that were in different camps that are working very, very hard to get this done. And they've done huge amounts of work. There's a whole another committee that's just, all they do is publicity and public relations. And they're just, there's a whole group of people that are
And
working.
the other thing too that's wonderful is how much of this is really grassroots Rockport people. You know, you look at the design team that's been working on this, you know, a lot of our capital campaign, the select board by definition, but, you know, it really has been a grassroots effort that's pushed it this far.
Yeah, no, it's been, you know, it's been very rewarding on that because of that ability to everybody focus on look, we all can agree we want a library, a really strong library in town. And we just made that the primary goal, and it's, after that, it's a matter of figuring out how do we get there. So I think that's what we've all been focused on.
Absolutely.
You'll notice the campaign theme is Let's Build It, so.
It's time.
It's time.
Yeah. Great,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we have on the discussion here, discussion of the Glen Cove Park. I was desperately trying to find a,
Well, I think in the process,
Yeah.
one of the offerings, or one of the things we'd like to hear, Randy, is if you could provide us an overview of any reasons why we might want to change the current ownership. Let's put it that way.
So what I did today was I went back for 2018, 17, and 16, looked over the numbers for police activity. How I did that was.
hold on one second, does everybody know what we're talking about here?
Sorry, I can do that. Save you.
Yeah, that's,
All right.
that would be a good
Okay,
idea.
why don't you
Certainly,
do-
yeah. Okay, real quick, Glen Cove Park, south on Route 1, was given to the town by the state of Maine in May of 2004. The town's responsible for maintaining the park since that time. Okay, since that time, there may be reasons, particularly associated with maintenance costs, et cetera, and other activities that we may want to take the opportunity, because we have a reverter clause in that deed, to turn that piece of property back over to the state. Okay, so that option is there if it were something that we wanted to consider. It's out of sight and out of mind. The police department has to patrol it because it's Rockport property. And, there's no decision at this time that's expected, but it's an agenda item for discussion, and at some point, we may want to make a decision to do something different than we're doing today.
The Parks Committee, I can't find the memo. Basically, Parks Committee talked about this at their last meeting, and there may have even been a motion, and I apologize, but the sense of it was that their first choice would be to sort of try to make access to a large portion of the park blocked off with like Jersey barriers or something, and just leave a very small amount up near the entrance. But barring that, if Randy didn't think that was practical, or if it didn't work very well, then their inclination would be to just basically close the park and let it return to its natural state.
That's my recollection, is that they were
Oh,
in
yeah,
favor
right,
of
of
giving it
course.
back
Yeah, well, giving it back to nature.
to the state.
Well, I'm not sure about that, and again, I sort of made the argument, I'm not sure we want to give away any land that we already have, because who knows what'll happen in the future, but, and also we'd have a little more control over it in its natural state if we owned it, rather than who knows what the state would do with it, but that's why we're having a discussion tonight, so.
Yeah, the property, Randy knows this better than I do, but I tend to drive by that multiple times a week. And from Highway 1, you only have visibility for the first few hundred feet of it, and then it just disappears right off into oblivion, and you don't know what's going on down there. And, those are areas of concern. The other part is, if you look at the view of it, we have to maintain that. And
No, I know.
It has a cost. And when I look at cost conservation for the town and where can we save money, and does this impact the world of, many a Rockport resident? I don't know if it does. So, it's a good thing to consider. The property doesn't have value to do much of anything else at it, because it's not set up to do so. But, we ought to just talk about it.
I would note that the comprehensive plan talks about shore access for residents. And this is a place that, we've talked about this, and we've actually looked at it in prior capital improvement plans. We've looked at possibly improving the shore access down there. The difficult part is the terrain down there is tough. And in order to do it, and if we make any shore access, it has to be ADA acceptable, or accessible rather. And that's pretty expensive. But we have to sort of look at our comprehensive plan also and take that into consideration. And I'll be interested to hear what Randy's summary of the activities that go on down there and his take on this.
Yeah, I apologize, Randy,
No,
for
that's fine.
cutting you
Yeah,
off there,
but
but I
no.
wanted to get
No,
some of this
No,
background
I think you did the
information out
right
there.
thing. It needed an explanation. We're not spending a huge amount of time complaint-wise down there. I went back today, and what I did was in our law enforcement system, I searched 2018, 17, and 16, and I just typed rest area into the narrative, basically like a Google search. So it brought up all of our rest areas, so I was able to pull up any complaints. For 2018, we've had 9 complaints down at the rest area. Now, out of that 9, 4 of those are the same individual, and it's driving related. It's an elderly person, and we've had complaints of, erratic vehicle and whatnot. And he's been checked and each time found to be okay. A couple of pedestrian checks, those would be, one was a person found asleep at a picnic table. The officers checked them because in this day and age, you never know if somebody's overdosed in an area like that or not. Another one was somebody pedestrian check was done because they had run a license plate and it showed that the operator was under suspension, so they checked the person. There was a sex offense complaint, and that was a complaint of somebody exposing themselves. The complainants in that matter did not wish to file a written statement, so we were unable to do anything prosecution-wise. We did locate the person, identified them. It was somebody from out of state. They said that they did not do it. They were criminally trespassed not to return down at the park there. Complaints for 2017. It was a suspicious vehicle. It was a party that was asleep there. There was an iPhone that was found property. And in 17, there was an informational complaint. A party was sexually propositioned for a sex act, and there was no description, no vehicle plate information, so we were unable to do anything prosecution-wise with that. In 16, there was a suspicious vehicle, trespassing, littering, and an intoxicated subject. And those were I didn't count the numerous patrol check or property checks, which is when the officers swing in there and check, but there were pages of those for all of those years. So the officers check it on a routine basis when they're down in that area. Now, as you know, that area is very difficult to surveil. Those areas are notorious meeting spots, and that could be meeting your family for a picnic or meeting friends to do something or meeting for illegal activity. I know from experience that drug exchanges, things like that happen in those areas. The difficulty, as you know, is, as you said, you can only see a certain part of that. You can't see it way down unless you drive in there.
But they can see, people
And
way
they can
down
see it's one way in, one way, and you gotta
Right, they
go
can
back
see you
up.
coming.
So if somebody parks way down there, they see us when we're coming down. Trying to walk down over that bank, and I think you know about the poison oak and poison sumac and poison ivy and things like that. I think it's a nice spot if it's used for legitimate purposes that it was designed for, but it also can be problematic because that's probably one of those areas that is so underreported of activity that goes on there that doesn't get to us.
Well, that's the point I was gonna make. I'm sure, talking from.
Oh, and
people
I've
that
heard
are
it from
on
a number of
committees,
people.
People see that and,
Yeah.
they just leave, they don't call 911 or you just leave.
And I don't know if we even do we have a feel for usage for Rockport residents versus people driving on Route 1 just doing the scenic turnout thing?
Yeah.
Because
My
my
s-
sense of it is, when I go by, I see an awful lot of people from somewhere else.
My suspicion is, Jeff, just what you're alluding to, it's mostly people that are traveling up the coast, and it's like one place where you can pull off and actually see the bay, and so they,
Right.
the people that use it, other than the people Randy's talking about, are people that are traveling from one point to another point, and it's a,
And I see, when I make passes through there myself if I'm going to Rockland. I see a lot of people using it for those legitimate purposes. I also see things that I'm highly suspect of, but I don't see anything going on. Some of that is just based on experience of doing the job for many years.
Just
No profile.
anecdotally, I mean, you
Exactly.
say your officers are driving in there and doing a check
Yep.
periodically. I mean, obviously, like Rick says, you know, anybody who's doing anything squirrely in there, they can see you coming, so they're gonna stash the stuff away or whatever, stop their activity.
You
But
know, if it was,
do you get any sense from those drive-throughs as to what the level of possible illegal activity is, or?
it's not a question I've asked any of them, they would report it, and they would have made contact if there was something of suspect nature that,
And you have
that
to-
would generate a
You
complaint
have to
as
keep in
well.
mind, it's not necessarily always illegal activities. So you can't just quantify it to that. I mean,
Right.
because we have had suspicions because of what we do, of what's going on, but you can't go by that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the practical aspects of owning it. I mean, as a Rockport resident, whether it were owned by the state or by the town of Rockport, how much difference would it make to me driving down there?
Didn't we?
I
didn't
think the
we-
state would probably close it down, because that's what
Yeah,
they've
that's
done
what
with a
was
number
maybe my next
of
question.
those.
Is I think if it passes back to the state, the Jersey barriers go up right at the entrance, and that's the end of that. And then we have the issue of people getting in there and doing illegal stuff, except now it's harder for law enforcement to get in there because they have
Right.
to go in on foot.
Right.
So that's a
Didn't,
consideration we have to think about.
didn't we ask, or somewhere along the line, about expenses that we incur on a yearly basis for maintenance? Whether it's mowing or repairing of things?
Well, it was talked about, you know, if Mike was here, you could address it. I don't think we ever had specific numbers, but a lot of those little covered areas do need to be reshingled by now. The barbecue grates are in bad shape, so.
I'm just wondering what we've spent
Yeah, I can get
over
that,
the
though.
years.
Well, it'll be a fair amount of money.
I think if you chose to keep it, but reduced the length of that road in there, and blocked it off at, maybe after the first 2 or 3 of those picnic tables, and provided a turnaround, but you'd need some signage out there that no campers could get down in there, because they wouldn't be able, Mark and I talked about that the other day, they wouldn't be able to turn around once
No.
they get in there. But,
And,
Oh,
do we gate that off in the evening like we do with Children's
it's-
Chapel?
it's open, but, I mean, that's something we could also do, too.
There's signage, and we've been very lax when I was there. There's signage that says it's closed from dusk to daylight or some
you're-
verbiage like that.
A lot of these are like your suspicious vehicles. These are after hours of the trespassing.
And nobody's ever summoned anybody, but, you know, they've just encouraged them to go somewhere else, and you note it in your comments section.
And I'll
Randy,
also
did you
put
just
in-
say
Go ahead.
that it's those times, it's after hours that you found those
No,
problems?
some of them were, Rick.
Okay.
Some of the trespass complaints were. But it's like anything. If you block the access off there, it's going to move the problem somewhere else. Other
Well,
parking
and-
lots and
and
places.
that's
like that.
fine, I understand that, you know, but sort of the question is, you know, we're responsible for the
Sure.
town of Rockport. You know, we can't.
Well, it'll probably move it to somewhere else in the town of Rockport, because there's a couple other places that
Back
are
of the
Well, no,
cemetery
you
on
know,
Warren.
I understand that too, but, you know.
Well, I mean, the bad news about the property is there's only one way in and it's hard to see down there, but the good news is that you could then block that off and you would fairly severely restrict access to the property. For example, if we had a gate there that was locked at night or in off-season or something. We do close
We
it
do
off. in
close
It
the
is
it
closed
season.
off during the winter, yeah.
And it could be closed, you know, at dusk. I mean, there is a chain that could be drawn across.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility, but that doesn't eliminate the activities that go on during the day, which I think are probably more of a concern in some respects than what might go on there at night.
So the question I have, you know, is, and you mentioned it earlier, is how much do we spend to operate and maintain?
Yeah, I can get that,
Yeah.
I can get that number for you.
Well,
And for those in the public that are paying attention, I'd like to hear if people are using that park for, you know, a park-type activity, you know? How many citizens are going down there to have a picnic or to you know, see the view or something like that? Especially for folks who maybe don't live on the water, live inland or whatever, and say, I want to get down to the water on a hot summer day and it'll be a little cooler. How
I
many folks are doing
suspect that, my suspicion is that I mean, well, there's probably some. My suspicion is people, the residents that want to get near the water will come to Marine Park or Walker Park.
Yeah, I would suspect so too, but it's a piece of information that I would, before we make a decision, we would want to have that piece of information, I think, from townspeople, because what we don't want to do is make a decision and then have a bunch of people say, why did you close that park? I used to use it all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's the case or not, but it would be good to hear that.
Having been there before I've been here, I said that that was the worst dollar that Rockport ever spent. And I'm inclined to seek the state out and give it back to them. That's where I'm at right now, because I know more, like Randy knows more than you guys know.
Yeah.
So,
To
that's how I
address
feel.
Jeff's point, I understand there's value in saying how much did we spend on maintenance, but is it really gonna make a difference to our decision? I mean, the maintenance is gonna be about $10,000 a year. If we brought it up to snuff with repairing the covered areas, okay, $45,000 a year. I mean, I think we're just sort of kicking the can down the road, waiting for those numbers.
Yeah, the annual costs are probably closer to the 10,000
Yeah,
number.
that's what I'm saying, to go in and mow and do
Megan's
everything.
saying even less than that. But your point is, it's not about the cost, really.
Well, is it really gonna affect our decision?
If you look at what the annual cost is, and then you look at how much money you would have to put into it to bring the facilities up to where you want, it may drive a different decision.
Well, it's good.
And I think
It's
I would go
gotta
back to, I want to know, are the townspeople using it? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. Are people using, if people are using it and getting value out of it, then we're getting
So
value for the money we
So
spend.
how are you gonna find that out, Ken?
I don't know.
So, I mean, are we gonna ask, the public tonight over the air, and you're gonna have
That's
five?
what I've done. I've already
You're
done
gonna
that.
have 5 people that say they use it, and we're gonna say, okay, let's keep it.
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know
how do
what
you
the
get a good
response will be.
litmus test?
Well, the press
I
is
don't
still
know,
here.
But I would be loath to vote this evening to say, let's get rid of it without having at least some period for the public to comment.
Well, and
There's 2 of us.
I'm concerned too about the whole issue of what is the state gonna do with it? I mean, once it's out of our control, then,
Well, I
there's
think what
downsides there
Randy
too.
suggested is what's gonna happen. They're gonna put a Jersey barrier across the front of it, and
Yeah,
they're
I
gonna
mean,
forget
if you-
about it. They're gonna let the
Yeah,
brush
exactly.
grow up and stuff like
But
that.
we don't know
And
that,
it's an
though.
eyesore then.
I live close to Route 3, and the rest areas out on Route 3, most of them they were blocked off and have grown back up.
Right, they don't want to maintain it.
It's not an eyesore necessarily, it, returns to a natural state.
Well,
you know,
maybe.
there's a-
I mean, maybe, depends on what the state does with it.
Well, no, if you
No,
don't do, if you
that's what I'm
don't do
saying.
anything, and, a
Yeah.
habitat, animals move in, and
Right.
birds and stuff.
But
so-
what does the state do with it? They put up a barrier and then
Yeah,
it becomes, I'm
probably.
saying if we give it back to the state, perhaps it becomes an eyesore. Perhaps if we have control over it, it's a different story.
Or,
Returning it to its natural habitat is not a bad thing.
That
but
costs money
if-
too,
Well,
because you
you
gotta
know,
go,
I mean,
you gotta
it's,
tear up the roads.
No,
and
no,
all that
no,
kind of
just,
stuff.
you
No.
just let that all just get overgrown again. There's no toxic chemicals you need to take away or anything, you just close it off and let Mother Nature take her course.
you could have someone do spot surveys on traffic in and out, just look at license plates. But again, there was no decision necessary for it.
right.
Nothing's needs to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, it's
Well, I
going to
think
get
putting it on the
closed
table
soon.
and letting the discussion happen
Yes.
in the community is worthwhile.
It's going to get closed.
I was gonna
Typically,
say-
we close it in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
So
it's maybe for the
why don't
winter.
we ask Rick to reach out to the state and say, listen, if we're headed in a direction to give it back to you, what might be your intention? They may not know, but at least we'll have,
Well, they won't know,
Well,
I don't think, and then with the
And-
change in
and-
administration, it will
right.
change next week.
And it'll
or
change next
whatever,
week
so.
anyway, so.
Well, okay, so you're right, we could talk about this all night. I guess nobody wants to
Right.
really make a decision. I think we all sort of know the options. You want to just come back to it a month from now or 2 months from now, see if there's any new information. What's the board's pleasure? So we can move on.
Let's say we've put it out there, and it's in the public view now, and I'd like to see just organically what happens. Do we hear from anybody about it, saying, oh, that's the worst idea in the world to close that park? I go down there, or, yeah, close it, get rid of it, I never go down, I don't know. Maybe we'll hear something.
what are you gonna give yourself or us as some form of deadline to make a determination?
I guess I don't have anything in mind at the present time.
I mean, we're going into the budget year, so we'll be looking at monies for that, whether it's $5 or 5,000, and that would help to know whether we're gonna close it or not.
We do, you know, what we budget is for the portable toilets there, the dumpsters there. Megan, is there anything else there?
Grass cutting.
Mowing.
The mowing? Do they do, there's no mowing there? And what we,
Oh, yeah.
what
Tree
needs,
trimming has been an
the tree
issue.
trimming,
I know.
the tree trimming is actually more up near the top and down at the bottom, just to protect, so that there's a view when you're driving down Route 1. Because eventually you get, it was
And I-
getting to the point when you're driving down Route 1, you don't
And
see the
they've
man.
done that bank at least 2 times that I can think of. The whole bank,
Yeah, I
down
think
to the
they, it
lower road.
looks like they were just in there and just did along the fence, the
So tho-
guardrail.
Those are types of expenses too that we ought to consider when we're, you know, what are our expenses?
And you got paving repair, you got cleanup, you've got gravel,
You know,
shoulder.
the covered picnic tables, they, you know, the
Where-
roofs of those picnic tables need work.
Where's Tom Farley with the municipal performance measuring program when you need him?
All right, well, we're gonna do this the old-fashioned way. I'm gonna entertain a motion.
I don't
You
have
did
one.
say that there wasn't gonna be a vote on it. In the materials, it did say there wasn't gonna be a vote
Oh.
on it.
Well, if it says-
That's what it said. It
There's
said
no
that
no
there was
decision is
All right,
expected.
well,
no
in
vote,
that
no
case,
decision.
let's stop
That's
that.
why we're doing
Boy, I
exactly
should've-
what we were told to do.
Yeah.
We're talking
Okay.
about it.
All right, let's talk about it, and
Yeah,
then let's
that-
move on to the next item.
I suspect the press will have something in the paper about this conversation, and also, I think Linda Clancy usually watches, so I suspect there'll be something in the paper about the conversation, and you may or may not hear.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to find out.
Okay.
That'll be one answer.
All right, so, well, I will make sure this gets on future agendas in the not-distant future. Next, we want to talk about job descriptions. I don't know if Mark wants to take the lead, or Rick, or both of you. We have a bunch of job descriptions here, which, you know, I've looked over briefly, haven't ground them out, but,
As you can see, you know, there's, I'm assuming that they printed up with all the potential changes on them. That they do need work. That was started, you know, when Stacy was here. It was moved over, Stacy and Megan were working on it. Stacy and, actually Ginny were working on it at one point, and then Megan. My recommendation is that, you know, they do need to be updated, they do need to be reviewed, that you just direct me to come back and finish these up and come back to you in December or January with a,
well, there's a bit of a problem with that, and I'm gonna ask Rick, Mark, to sort of address the background to this request.
Well-
And so there is sort of a time frame that this can fit into, Mark.
Yeah, and I'll avoid talking about my disappointment, because I've been asking for this since May, and I was in hopes that it would have been completed by now, so that we could put a small group of people together and go out and do a proper, thorough research of salaries pertaining to each of these job descriptions
For the upcoming budget.
for the upcoming budget season. I know one was recently done, but it was in good faith, but I think it could be done better, could have been done better. The changes that I see on some of these, when was that done? Is that something that was recently done?
yeah, it's been done over a period of a couple of years, and mostly it is, as I said in my notes, most times the job description gets amended when the position becomes vacant and we're filling the position with a new position, unless it's a union job.
I guess what I would say is, I don't even know why we have something that's not a completed process before us. Because, I mean, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time until I see a finished product that I can critique.
Well, let me ask this sort of for the both of you, because there are time constraints with the upcoming budget process. So would it be possible for the two of you to identify those critical job descriptions that you're interested in and sort of get them on the fast track so they are available to the budget, or to Mark and the budget committee?
Go ahead.
Who's involved in developing these position descriptions?
That's my
Well, they've been
question.
developed over years of,
Who now is currently involved in developing the position descriptions?
they've been, as I said, they've been developed over a period of years. When it gets, the work that's being done, was being done when Stacy was here, was formatting them so that they were all the same.
But
Was mostly a formatting.
I'm worrying
but
about content.
specific,
Right.
yeah, specifically.
Content, that would be, that's me. The
Except for
content-
one.
Except for one,
Town
mine.
manager
Yeah, I
one, which
get
is
that.
our
All right, so,
responsibility.
so you've got the content piece.
Right.
But the department heads, I mean.
Right, the content would be
Department
co-
heads,
the-
you know, in my experience, department heads should have the responsibility of making
their
sure
own-
the job descriptions are drawn up for themselves. I mean, obviously, they don't get to approve their
Mm.
own job description, but the best person who knows what they do as part of their job is the person who does it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the department heads to work with their people to draw up those
Mm-hmm.
job descriptions and then submit them, I mean, that's the process that I've
Right.
always followed in my career.
But these job descriptions have existed for many, 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 many
Right.
years. Because some of them have been in place, because the people haven't changed positions and their job basically
I
hasn't
understand
changed.
that, but it doesn't really go back to my question of, are we seeking out the department heads and that process and that inclusive process, or is somebody
If we're
in
making
one
changes to, if we're
department-
making changes to it, substantive changes to the job description, it would go back to the, it would be in conjunction with department heads.
Have they had input with what we've seen here tonight?
No. Because
Why are we
most,
seeing it?
because you asked for it.
I wanted a completed job
Yeah, see.
description,
Well-
not something that's been in the works when Stacy was here and,
Right.
you know.
And even if changes aren't being made, right, even if changes aren't being made, if there's a job description that's out there that's been around for 5 years or whatever, that job description may not reflect the job as
Yes.
it's expected to be done today. So those department heads and positions within those departments need to have input regardless of whether or not changes are being suggested by you or by somebody.
Yes, I agree with you totally. And they do, particularly with with any jobs that are not beneath them, are there, they're- under their supervision, they are directly responsible for that piece. The trick is to have them be consistent from one department to another department to another department, that they all look the same, and that's what we
Sure.
were trying to get
So,
to.
Sure.
something that just struck me as a little odd, and I know of the previous experiences with previous managers, and like Stacy, for instance, being the assistant, how come our finance director is doing the work instead of your
Because it was
assistant?
something that they worked, Stacy was working with Ginny on, and then Stacy and Megan were working on them, so that's what, my recommendation is that you kick it back to me and give me a direct, direct.
Guess what? It's gonna be, and I personally would like to see it in December.
Right, okay.
And that the department heads and their people are all consulted in that
Yep.
process, right?
Yep.
And then at some level, of course, somebody needs to make those descriptions be consistent in formatting and everything across the board, or type, and I don't mean the type font, I mean the type of, there should be a template,
Yeah,
frankly.
exactly.
That's in
That they have to
the,
follow,
in the town manager's admin's position description is to maintain and
yeah,
manage those position descriptions.
yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this is something that the select board would sort of like and direct the
Yep.
town manager to do, and we would like to see the follow-up on this.
It will be done by the December 3rd.
At least the content, I don't
Right.
care, the format we can fix later, but the content would be good to have by December.
I mean, you have to have that, you have to have a good content so that you can do apples to apples when you're selecting
Is
the.
that gonna work for your schedule, Mark? I mean, you can start to get your group together, or however that's gonna work, but,
I'll work on it.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, in a process on this, everybody gets a chance to look at their own position description and suggest input, changes, that kind of thing. Work with, then they go to the department managers, do the same type of thing. The department managers should be putting their fingerprint on it. So now you get the employee's fingerprint on it, the department manager's, fingerprint on it, then it all rolls up to you. You get to put your fingerprint on it. And it goes in for formatting, and that's all spelled out in here is how and who does all that stuff. And then it could come forward, I would think, in a very nicely finished product.
Yep, we can do that.
The same type of look and feel between each one of them. You know, you don't want one that's 47 pages long and one that's
Right.
one page.
Right, right.
y-
And that should be the
And they all
process.
should cover similar things, not exactly the same, but they have similar
Roles,
components.
responsibilities,
Yep.
I mean,
So
skills,
the-
all that
right.
kind of
Your
stuff.
report to blah,
So
blah,
let me
blah.
throw this out for a possible schedule for this. If we can have the content by December, and then, you know, we can weigh in as need be, and then the formatting and any final changes could be done by January. Does that make sense?
I think you could do content and format all by December 3rd pretty easily. I mean,
Is that a realistic goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, yeah.
Okay.
You heard it here.
So what we're looking for out of this is on December 3rd, the town manager's finished product on the position descriptions, ready for us to review.
I'd like to ask permission to utilize your assistant to work with MMA to help pull together lists of towns that most closely mirrors each of the descriptions that we'll be doing. That's a long question.
Yeah.
It's basically getting her to get a contact for us, the group, so that we'll be able to call up and say, this is what we're looking for a fire chief position. What towns can you give us that most closely mirror the description that we have?
That's, I mean, just knowing MMA, at MMA, they're not gonna be able to, that's not what they do.
I know, but I have to start somewhere. and
Yeah,
I- The group will have to determine, what your criteria is for comparisons.
Yeah, you're going to make, that's another whole step, which we've talked about. That's another whole step in it. That's a much different process, and the first step is to get our job descriptions done. And then the next step is to start collecting the job descriptions of representative towns that, and you guys can decide that,
Based on
looking-
a criteria that we
ba-
haven't picked yet. but
Right,
yeah.
pick a criteria and decide which towns you want to make us comparable to. And then you go through and you collect the job descriptions, but going out to the towns to find a job description that matches the Public Works Director's job description, it may be that one town it'll match in one town, but not in every other, and so you'd be trying to compare.
I sort of look at it as valuation, location,
Yeah, right.
population,
If you
those
got-
types of things, and then pick your towns accordingly.
That piece, certainly, the board should, that's a question for the board. To say, here's the towns that we think we should be making our apples-to-apples comparison to, and then we can start looking at collecting those job descriptions.
And some of those things, though, I don't think, and it was a prime example of your survey that you did before, you didn't get a lot of replies back from the cities and towns that you requested them from, but all of them don't have apples to apples. I mean, your county that you asked for information from doesn't have a fire chief. So what I'm saying is, I'm trying to find only 5 places, not 9, and boil it down to a little simpler.
And the new MMA salary survey is much more user-friendly. Megan uses it quite a lot. It's much more user-friendly. It's all online now, so it allows us to sort a lot more differently. Before, it was, you just went to the towns of, 2,500 to 5,000 population, and you just looked at all of the data for those towns. Now, I believe we have the ability to sort through that data with a bunch of different potential fields.
I would suggest that as a select board member, Mark, you can feel free to contact MMA yourself. I mean, that's part of their service to us as select board members, so you don't have to necessarily go through the town office for that. I have done that before on various different issues, especially when we were in the process of hiring a town manager before.
And I guess what I meant was finding that contact
Right.
person, not necessarily.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
But
If you
it-
call them and tell them what you want, they are very responsive. At least I've found it. It's been a long time since I've had conversations with them, but they are very responsive.
They're gonna
so.
direct you to the job descriptions that are on, that they have posted online, which they have a lot of them. But for them to go through and sort through, the first step, the biggest first step would be to start looking at just what you were talking about, Mark, is valuation. What are the communities that you feel like we should be comparing ourselves to? Is it
Well,
population-based?
I have to jump in and say, that's what we did before. And I thought that what Mark was gonna try to do was not necessarily look for full towns to compare with, but try to find comparable positions, because, I mean, if we collect 5 towns, none of them are gonna have exactly the same positions that we have, and some of them may not have half of them.
And that's what I'm saying, is that each position could have 5 different towns
Okay.
to represent that position.
Okay, I
because
guess I
one size.
misunderstood then. I thought you were gonna.
Yeah, no, the one that was done before was done in good faith, but I don't think,
Okay, I misunderstood
Yeah.
then, so I see what you're saying.
So,
Okay. Next on the agenda is to discuss our manager's goals, there's 6 of them that we have here in the packet. I think this is really just for the public's awareness that, the goals are the library. Number 2 would be to look into economic development, which would include things such as the RES site and broadband, working on performance management within the town office. And this is basically doing your exit interviews and annual reviews, et cetera. Looking to expand the town's email list. That could include AARP, but basically, in this day and age, our town should have a very robust database of all the residents' emails. So that
Who wish to share them with.
who wish to share them with the town, so that, it could be sorted and directed towards various people. Do some team building, which is, the process is underway, including the select board, and then looking at some issues for the West Rockport Fire Station. So,
on that note, I just had a little bit of a thought. I mean, the school has a brilliant system where if they have an issue, they send out a mass email.
right, it's through.
Have we
constant
ever talked to them to see if they would reach out to them and ask if they wanted to be part of our email program? Not for us to reach out, but for them to say through their system to Rockport.
For us to use their system?
No. No, for them to use their system that's in place now, to reach out to their Rockport people
Oh,
and say,
oh,
we've been approached by the town, would you be interested in sharing your email address with them for business purposes only, or
Right.
however you
oh,
want to phrase it?
oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, so that they make the contact.
They make the
Right.
contact,
Okay.
and that way we're out of it, and if these people want to, they'll get a hold of us, and if not, but they have a great block of, I would assume that.
Yep. I can,
Good
actually,
idea.
I can, we're trying to set up a meeting. As we heard last night, we typically meet with the superintendent quarterly, and we're trying to set that meeting up now.
Just real quick on the discussion of the goals. I guess I'm used to, I am used to seeing the goals more specifically stated, as opposed to general themes, you know, with specific actions associated with each and some milestone dates attached. The concept of the SMART goal, right?
Okay,
I mean, you know, it says, the goal states West
Right.
Rockport Fire Station. What,
yeah, I see your
what is,
point. yeah.
what is
And
going to be
that
done?
was one of my suggestions. I was looking for a strategic plan for the West Rockport Fire Station.
So is
And
that,
I think some of that we had in the discussion when we had the workshop, so.
I mean, so the goal statement ought to be develop a strategic plan or outcome or future path forward for the West Rockport Fire Station by something, some date.
Also, I would not group the liaison outreach to ARP as part of expand the email list. I mean, we talked about that, but we talked about this particular goal, and it really is to encourage that outreach with their community network so that we can incorporate ideas to help understand and serve our seniors in the community better, which doesn't really have much to do with email lists.
I think that the headline for that goal was more just outreach, period. And one way
Yes.
to do that was to reach out to AFR.
Exactly.
Another way to do it was to expand
Sure.
the email list and things like that.
Okay, so that's a good point, so
I
maybe.
think that's what I
Maybe
remember
that's
it
the
from, yeah.
reworking of the goal.
What would be the appropriate mechanism for us to rework these a little bit? We did this in a workshop. Do people on here recognize what goals they brought up, and perhaps they could individually rewrite them and resubmit them to us?
I could do that.
I can do it for the ones that I was involved with, yeah.
Does everyone?
Sure,
maybe we
they
can-
should be consistent.
How about
though.
if I do the library, because that was just sort of a general one.
Yeah.
Economic development, was that you, Deb?
Yes,
And performance management,
Yep.
probably Jeff.
Yeah.
Expand the email list.
That's me.
Okay, liaison outreach was also you. Or who?
Yeah,
yeah,
you can
the number
rework it,
4 I
I
can
think. Okay.
rework, but
Rework
yes,
it.
that
Keep
was
it
me.
one goal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that one may be more expand community outreach, and then one of
Right.
the items would be,
Right,
Right.
that's what we just
And
talked
email
about.
list.
Right.
Okay.
right.
Team building, whose sort of was that?
I can do
puppy?
that one.
These are all yours.
No, that's my last
And
one.
West Rockport Fire Station was Ken.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just, you folks develop those a little bit further and then get them back to us and we'll approve them next time.
The concept of SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound.
Okay?
If we keep those 5 themes, and you just Google that to find that stuff.
SMART
Those
goals.
elements are in the goal statement, which shouldn't be much more than 1 or 2 sentences.
Okay.
The format will be pretty well fair and consistent. That way it helps Rick, and
Yeah,
the
sure.
ambiguity
Yeah, it makes
is
it
gone.
Yeah.
You know, you say, okay, yeah, I can buy onto that and it's
Right.
doable, right? But, you know, when you have a general statement like library,
Yeah, right, I
takes
get
Right.
it.
that takes on
Okay. And also, Linda, just,
say
we
I
were
went.
also going to put together a list of the individual select people's goals. Can we have that for next time, too? Okay. Okay. Also in our packet now, we have a whole slew of committee bylaws that have been looked over, edited a little bit, and now submitted for our approval. There are still some committees who have not responded, and I guess it's my responsibility as chair to send a note out to their chair people and ask them to go along, but,
Well, or the liaisons, I think, could take on that.
Or the
responsibility.
liaison
I mean,
could
for
do
me,
that.
it's my cemetery is in here, but, for example, ordinance review committee hasn't met yet. They haven't started their season yet, although I did, this will come up from liaison reports. I did interface with Bill Napower about when that's gonna happen, and it is gonna happen fairly soon.
okay.
ZBA, same thing.
Okay. So, do you folks just want to approve these en masse, or would you like to go through individually? What's the board's pleasure?
Just a thought, because I mean, it's much easier to keep everything in the month of, rather than having some in October, some in November, some in December. The ones that have not yet completed or been contacted.
These are in the yellow.
Yep. And I know Alan will be working on his. That's a minor change. But can we, personally, I think it's better housekeeping if we can all do
Table
them
it
all
all.
in 1 month.
Okay. Well,
I
let's-
mean,
I'd rather do it too.
Well, I guess I don't have that strong feeling about it. I don't think these are necessarily bound by renewals or whatever. I think, you know, that we're gonna approve them, and then they will be relooked at every so often, I think. And,
I'd like to see more consistency between them. I mean, I understand that there's certain committees that are not gonna have consistency. I mean, the budget committee is gonna be different, the library committee is gonna be different, planning board's gonna be different, zoning board of appeals. But there's a number of these committees that I think, I think there needs to be more consistency in terms of the provisions,
Yeah.
similar to what we do with the position descriptions.
Yeah, I think Diane could try to do that, but, you know, part of the problem too, Deborah, is these are largely volunteer committees.
Right.
And, you know, it's kind of hard to hammer on people that, look, you need to, you know, follow these regulations and everything, and kind of force people to do it. And these groups
Yeah.
tend to look at things, oh, yeah, this looks pretty good, and
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming
I
from.
mean, the only one of the list that's different really is Pathways, and that's a two-town
I
committee.
understand that. I should have mentioned that one too as being different. But the thing is that I guess it's a little strange in my view, because boards that I've sat on before that had committees, so it was really the board that established the bylaws for committees. And to the extent that certain committees had to be different, and to the extent that obviously the work of the committees is different, et cetera, but there was really, the policy was set at the board level, and it was the committees then, the bylaws went that direction instead of up. And so it's not an issue of hammering people to do certain things, it's just where there's just, obvious inconsistencies,
My suspicion is that these committees, Ken, you've sat on this board long enough. I mean, it's been a thing that's come up on pretty much every year. But that some of these things, these committees, the bylaws may have been created originally by the board, and it's been,
Right.
It created originally by the board.
Yeah.
Kicked to them, and then it's up to them to kind of recommend revisions back to the board, keeping them up to date.
And I think that's a proper process, that the board sends the bylaws, some consistent bylaws, where applicable, understanding that there are certain committees that can't be, zoning is different, planning is different because of the quasi-judicial nature, pathways because of the two towns, budget because they're elected, I understand all of that, and so those committees have to be different, but there's a number of them that don't have to be, and it really ought to be not putting the burden on the committees to come up with these bylaws, but rather us saying, here's the bylaws, tell us what doesn't work for you.
But I think what we're talking about here is that they have bylaws. Most of them have some form of bylaws that were created. We're just trying to get them to revise and update them.
Yeah, and for, just 1 minute too, because Diane has done a yeoman's job.
Yes.
Trying to
Sure.
track them all
in
down.
trying to standardize the format and everything on a lot of these, so believe me, this is progress.
It's better, I know, it's
So-
better than it was.
And my point in having consistency is that, when you're talking about the job descriptions of the committee bylaws, and there's another one that's slipping my mind right now, but the ideal thing would be for them all to have been done in October of 18, and then in 3 years, your thing pops up on your calendar, and they're all looked at again, so that we don't have things that, your library committee, I think, 2001 is the last time
Right.
according to this. So we don't want to be 15 years, 10 years, 5 years out of date, because it creates more work. If you dust it off more frequently, then it's easier to update.
Right, so I'm go back to 2001 versus 2014.
So that,
The
that's
oldest one,
Right.
Well, I would-
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna suggest in terms of the budget committee and the library committee, I don't think the select board has any purview over those
I
bylaws.
already said that. I already said that. I already
I don't
said
think
that
we
they're-
even would approve them.
Yeah, I already said the budget committee is a different animal. They're elected
Yeah.
they're elected officials.
Planning board and zoning board we do, because we appoint
Right.
those folks, and that, like you say,
But
it's
they're
different because they're
quasi-judicial
quasi-judicial, so
and
their,
blah,
their
blah, blah.
form's gonna be different.
Right.
I mean, I think, and the tough part about these committees is the personalities are all different. The committees all function differently. Some of them meet quarterly, some of them meet monthly, some of them don't meet in the summer, some of them don't meet in the winter,
Yeah, and
and
that's
things like
fine,
that.
and that's why you have a section that says meetings,
Right.
and then to the extent that one has meetings monthly and one has meetings quarterly, then that's what theirs says, but they all have a section that says meetings, which they do have a little more consistency in that now, for sure.
But I guess my point being is that if the bylaws come down from the select board to these committees, you know, I worry about them saying, yeah, fine, okay, and then just ignoring them and doing their work. That's why I think it works better from the bottom up, personally. I mean, yes, we did this 5 or 6 years ago. We sent the committees all templates for here's how we'd like the bylaws to look, and I think you can see most of them do look that way. And maybe some of the sections are a little different in some committees, but not too bad. I mean,
We had trouble getting those back.
yeah, we did. I mean, we did. There's no question about it.
And I guess another thing, that the reason we're doing this is because we're not always gonna be here, and it will make it better for future boards not to have to sift through the
Oh,
things
yeah,
we're
absolutely.
sifting through
Yeah, it's
now.
good business.
I'm having much better success with notes being taken and given to Diane, either directly or through me, to be presented to us than what has been in the past, I think. But,
Yeah, look at, I put on my lawyer hat, I'm sorry, I can't help but do that, I can't divorce myself from my career, my career completely, and I look at something that says conflict with laws, okay? And there should be no committee that has anything different on conflict with laws. They should be the same. When it comes to quorums, one talks about what a quorum is, another doesn't. That just doesn't make sense to me.
how's your hand, Linda? You getting tired of writing yet? Perfect.
All right. What is the board's pleasure?
I would be happy if you want, as I've done with the vehicle policy and internal controls, I would be happy to take on the task of working with Diane in an effort to maybe make these more consistent, if the will of the board is to do that. And of course, they have to be approved by the committees.
So it would all have to sort of be kicked back to them.
Yeah, but we only have a few. We only have, obviously not pathways. There's exceptions. We're not gonna kick back again. There are exceptions on some of these committees. But when you say all kicked back, we only have like 4 here. We have budget committee, and we agreed that we wouldn't touch budget. We have pathways, and we wouldn't touch pathways. I think we would touch cemetery, and we would touch harbor, and parks committee. So you're talking about kicking 3 back for probably what's fairly minor changes, and the rest of them haven't even given us the bylaws.
But
Rockport beautification. I
It's
wrote
not
'em.
here, is it?
Of course it is.
Is it? I'm sorry.
I wrote it a year ago.
Sorry, is it in what we have in front of us here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when I wrote
okay.
these, again, at Ken's suggestion, I pulled out the template and really just tried to,
But if there's, Deb, if there's
Okay, well,
improvements,
I guess it didn't print out when I printed them out, so, all right, okay.
if
So
there's
sorry,
improvements to the
miscommunication.
template that need to be made for consistency, like you were
Yeah.
just saying, that makes a lot of sense. Even if the budget committee is a separate elected body, it would behoove them to follow some template and say,
Right.
we've got to have, our bylaws should include something about what a quorum is. Here's the recommended quorum.
What a conflict of law is,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
right.
here's the recommended language. They can choose or not choose to put it in, but my guess is that they will probably put it in. But,
Here's a question for Deb, too. For instance, in the Rockport Beautification Committee, our group felt strongly we wanted to lead off with the mission statement. But, you know, that's not really in the,
I think they should all lead off with a mission
Right.
statement.
well,
What are they here for? What are they supposed to
what's
be
their
doing?
purpose?
Your mission statement in section 1 is on purpose and scope. You know, we get into semantics, but,
well, that's true, yeah.
you know,
But
I
it ought
guess
to
you
state,
could move it down.
But the cemetery committee has a mission of the cemetery committee, the harbor, the purpose of the harbor committee, parks committee, they have,
Well, I think Rick's suggestion to Deb of working with a template might have some merit. And perhaps, you know, if you're willing and you would like to develop a template with the idea that you could state in the template, for example, purpose and scope, parentheses, this should be filled in by the committee.
you just,
Conflict of law, this has to be verbatim.
no, it is what it is, it's just lock cells, I mean, or lock,
Yeah.
you just lock the, text.
No, I take your point, right.
Okay, is that the pleasure of the board to turn Deb loose on it?
I can support turning Deb loose on the,
I'm good with that.
Okay, thank you, Deborah, again, for your
yes.
Any other comments before we move on? All right, the moment we've all been waiting for,
really?
Megan.
Oh, Megan has been waiting for.
Discuss creating reserve accounts for the public works, and this could be discussion, but also an action. Megan's going to get up here, I think, shortly and sort of tell us what couple of reserve accounts. And I'll go ahead right up front, and sort of, we had this discussion before the meeting about, well, actually, why don't you do your presentation first, and then,
So let's define we not being the board, but we meaning you and Megan.
yeah, I'm sorry, Megan and I had a
We haven't had
discussion
this
at a time,
discussion.
right?
And to be, to be clear, I mean, I'm supportive, I support the idea of, creating reserve accounts for specific projects. The second one may not be as critical, but the one for storm and emergency stuff, to keep us from having to go back and cut into our UFB, I think makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's hear what Megan has to say, and then we can chew on it.
So there's two things happening here. One is we have started to receive our federal and state EMA funds from the storm that happened last October. Those funds are meant to help the town with such emergency situations. At the GFOA conference I went to, other towns had said that they put such money into reserve accounts, so if they are faced with the same situation again, they have funds that they can expend for such purposes without tapping that department's budgets that they planned for the year, not necessarily knowing that we could have such a natural event. Some went on further to say that it could be used for overruns if we had a significant winter, or if a road washed out and we had to invest more money than what maybe would be in the budget to repair those. They have also, many of the towns said that if they have a light winter and they have extra money in their winter sand or their winter salt, or even in overtime, they'll take those extra funds and put it into that same type of reserve fund, so that if they are faced with a large-scale disaster, they have funds that they can use for that. The second thing is, about 25 years ago, the state started a program that was essentially forcing municipalities to create salt sheds to protect erosion and
the salt product seeping into the ground. As part of that program, the state, from what I understand, was to pay a portion of the expense for municipalities creating these structures. The money was first targeted towards municipalities that didn't already have existing structures. It happened that Rockport already had an existing structure, so we were put off onto the tail end of receiving this funding. So 25 years later, we are receiving nearly $26,000 to invest into our salt shed. It happens that the secondary salt shed that is at Public Works is in desperate need of some repair, which they use as a storage facility for their plows, for their sanders, for extra equipment. And I think it would be important and less of a burden on the taxpayers to use this free money that we're receiving from the state and put that towards repairing that existing structure.
Okay, well, let me kick off with just my quick comments that, money is a tool. And for it to be valuable, you have to work with the tool. It does nothing to just sort of sit there. And when I think about my home budget, yes, I have, certain emergency repairs that come up, and maybe I have a little money sort of set aside for that. But I don't set aside a reserve account for if my disposal burns out. I don't set aside money for when a doorknob wears out. I don't set aside money for when my doorbell breaks down. And my point here is that we have, how many reserve accounts does the town need? When we have money sitting out there sort of in these accounts, they're not really working for us. I know it's a what if. It's not really working for us. And is that detracting from our ability to execute some projects now because we're a little bit too worried about the future? And I don't know the answer.
I don't think that's necessarily the case, because like you and I talked before, those reserve accounts are generally used to offset expenses in the budget. So in multiple departments, you will see revenues from reserve accounts. Like an example.
Every year.
The fire department has an equipment reserve. That equipment reserve's purpose is to fund lease payments for new equipment, so that when we buy a new fire truck, we're not seeing a big increase in the fire department budget because we've already leveled out those payments. So when we do projects like that, we're not seeing a huge increase in our overall budget because we have the offsetting revenue from those reserve accounts.
And Doug, I would agree with you that to have a reserve account to replace the garbage disposal is, that's, that's not the best use of our money. But in the event of an emergency, these costs can be pretty significant and put the town into a tailspin. And I can relate a story from, one of my previous jobs where we had a culvert wash out that was a $200,000 replacement for it. We didn't have the money set aside any place to do it, and there was money from FEMA to replace the culvert, but we didn't have there was a 25% match. We didn't have the $50,000 to replace it, so we had to put it off till the next year. We just dragged the old culvert back and put it in place. The next year it washed out again, and waiting for us to budget enough money to cover our share. So particularly in this case, this is money that's come back from FEMA, that we could put into an account. And as you see in my notes, I'm not saying we should put that money into an account and then use it, say, okay, we're gonna pay for stuff out of the budget out of that account. This is specific for some sort of storm-related emergency or some emergency, and I don't think it has a never-ending cap. I think there needs to have a cap on it.
Should we use it to buy the generator?
You certainly could, yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
don't mean to dominate.
Yeah, but that's good, very good point. Yep.
I want to say that Doug's comment that money is a tool is absolutely true. However, in this case, it's a tool that I think could be used, and what's the goal of this tool? The goal of this tool is to keep our mill rate fairly stable over a long period of time. Now, we don't know whether next winter is going to be an extreme winter or not, but we have a pretty good idea that winters fluctuate. And so we can say that with some certainty that over the next 10 years, that there's going to be a few of those years where we spend a lot of money on winter maintenance or plowing or whatever it is, and in that reserve account, maybe one winter we break more cutting edges on the plows than we would in a normal winter. By having that reserve account, that's a tool that allows us to, number one, keep from having to take a TAN note out, and number two, to keep our mill rate a little bit more stable than we might otherwise be able to. So, and I think the idea of capping the reserve account is a good one, because we don't want that, if we look over 5 years and all of a sudden, hey, that thing's at the cap, and we don't put any more in, and if we get another windfall like this salt shed money, then we could use it to offset other expenses or to turn back to the taxpayers or something like that. But I think the reserve account has some value, especially for Public Works. Their budget is the biggest budget in the town.
And problems are big problems.
And we've had, at times, we've had an equipment reserve account in there that hasn't had very much money in it and used it fairly frequently. And in some cases, an equipment problem came along, there wasn't enough money in there to take care of it, so.
Now, I guess one question would be, what history has Rockport experienced? Or are we just doing what everybody else is starting to do because everybody else is starting to do it? Do any of our neighboring towns, do you know, have this type of reserve?
With snow, yeah.
And the other question is, what did we do when the Annis Road Bridge?
We took it out of budget, and, you know, we were lucky we were not able to get it out of we did not need to take it out of the UFB, I don't believe, right?
So I guess we've survived doing a $100,000 issue
But
by being creative, so I'm
we
not.
haven't gotten we've not done other things that were on our list of things to do to get that done.
I mean, I'm more of a fan of overspending a line item for cutting edges on a plow because we can justify it. You know, it's an item that needs to be replaced. You have an overage by X amount of dollars.
So it's not necessarily that easy. If you have, say, a significant March or April snowstorm, by
Yeah, that's
that time, most departments have expended their budgets. So your ability,
For what part of that budget, though? Sand, salt, hours, overtime?
It doesn't matter. Overall, the budget is significantly expended by that point. So your ability to make up huge overruns in particular lines by taking that money from even other departments, your ability to do that has significantly shrunk come April.
But it's explainable because of situations such as storms. You know,
It's explainable, but it still could result in a TAN.
Right.
I have a question. I had obviously read through this. You know, what you're talking about was a reserve account for Public Works, and then we have the two different amounts that have come in, the 17,000 plus FEMA money, right? And then the $26,000
It's
from
two
the
separate
state.
things.
So it'd be two separate reserve accounts or two
so
separate issues?
Separate issues, I
The
think.
reserve account is more of a long-term thing. The
Yeah, I
the
understand.
salt shed
Yeah.
money, the salt shed is something that has to be fixed within the next year,
Right.
18 months.
Okay, so you're
So-
actually saying with the 26,000 to use it, and with the 17,000 to put that into the
Right,
reserve?
but in order for me to roll that money over, we have to put it into a temporary holding account. And in order for me to not just dump it into the general fund,
Gotcha.
I need select board approval to put it into a temporary holding account.
I think I'd be more comfortable with not having it labeled strictly for highway, but it could be, you know, maybe you have a police car that blows an engine. You know, so that's something that you don't account for, but it's money that could be tapped into. Maybe you have a harbor boat that the engine goes to hell, and you have to buy a new engine. Maybe there ought to be a fund that is overseen that can help everybody, not just somebody.
That's basically the definition of your unassigned fund balance.
Right.
Well, but you're,
That's kind of the
but
UFB.
you're specifically
Right.
trying to set this reserve up for highway, I think.
That's where the big, you know,
Well, yeah,
is that
no.
a reasonable option? Yes, that you'd have a reserve account for, the challenge is that it just doesn't become like
A slush
the
fund.
slush fund. It has a specific purpose, and if we can back up a little, we're talking about two different things. So let's talk about the $17,000 for the FEMA money, and, because that would be a longer-term reserve account. And if you don't think that that's a good idea to start creating the reserve account for that purpose, that's what we're coming here for you. We're presenting this as a way to start that reserve account. If the board doesn't think that that's an idea we should be doing, then fine. I mean,
It'll go into the UFB. if
it'll
we
go
don't
in the UFB, and, you know, as Doug said, you know, you could use that money to fund get us closer to where we need to be with the generator.
But you're also looking to get closer with your UFB numbers if you go by.
Well, yeah.
So, you know.
Right,
you-
that's.
Where do you want to put it?
I think we have a good plan for moving the UFB forward. You know, I think the UFB is growing at a pace that makes sense. You know, I think that's growing at a pace that makes sense to us. I think we have a pretty good plan of that. It's about, do you think that this kind of reserve account is a good idea or a bad idea, or one that you're not willing to fund?
Let me ask a question if I can. This is money that came in from FEMA to reimburse us for expenses incurred during a storm event, okay?
We have a couple that are outstanding, correct?
We'll get another payment
But-
from MEMA.
And I don't know, the question I'm gonna ask is does FEMA look at that and say, well, wait a minute, you know, Rockport took that money that we gave them for the expense and dumped it into their UFB, and therefore, they don't really need it, because they covered the expense.
Well, they don't care.
No.
Because you can argue that you took money out of
Out of
other
the-
funds to pay for the damage to begin with.
Yeah,
So they-
that's the question I'm asking, I guess, but it
That's
is
exactly
money that was expended for public work, so.
And we're already through that budget, so I can't apply it as revenue to that budget to offset those expenses because it ended
It was a
June
prior
30th,
budget year, yeah.
right?
I got a couple questions. Difference between UFB and the accruals,
Reserves?
or the reserves,
Reserves.
rather, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
But my question is around control. On the UFB, who can move that money?
Just the
Just the
select
select board? All right, reserve funds,
anything $2,000 or more in the aggregate would have to be done by the select board.
all right. So it's just where do you want the money to go and for what?
You know, that idea about the generator, I'll admit, just popped up to me just as I was sitting here. I hadn't
No, it
thought
didn't.
about it. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. But there, I must say, and I guess I'd think about it a little bit, but there seems to be a beautiful symmetry to taking that money that's coming back to us for a storm and
right.
use it to protect our town office
During a storm?
during a storm.
Right.
That's brilliant.
It is.
When you said it, I thought,
It's
oh,
not the worst idea I've ever heard. I
yeah,
have to
no,
admit.
when you said it, I thought, well, okay, that kind of makes.
How much do we expect the other FEMA payment to be?
It's
You said
$5,000 or $6,000.
Timing on that?
Whenever the state releases the funds, so 26 years from now.
Hopefully not.
It's getting late.
I mean, I like Doug's idea too about the generator as far as if you're gonna use it for something.
Do we have a reserve account for public works for anything? Do we have a equipment reserve for public
Just-
works?
We have a very small equipment reserve, which was my understanding was started for if they run out of cutting edges
Yeah,
and
yeah,
need
I
cutting
remember.
edges. It has like a $6,000 balance in it.
Didn't we
How
up
many
that?
do they have though? Just the one, or do they have more than one?
Reserve account? I
Yeah,
think
well, they
it's
have
the-
reserve accounts for vehicle reserves.
No.
No, it's,
No,
oh, it's
because
fire
it's-
that does that.
Right.
Yep.
I think it's just the one.
Just the one?
But I thought we upped the maximum on that. Did
We
up-
upped the
didn't
maximum,
fund it.
but we
haven't
haven't been
put any
funding
money
it.
in it, okay.
Are you suggesting we create a separate reserve account other than the equipment reserve for public works?
Well, my thought behind it was that it wouldn't turn into just a slush fund for public works, that a snow emergency or a general emergency reserve would be just that they couldn't use it to,
Redo the walls.
right,
Right.
or buy food or whatever, that it would have to be to cover unexpected overtime expenses or to buy additional salt if we run out of salt at the end of the year, or additional sand. We had that problem this past year. We ran out of sand. We were out of money in the sand line. Luckily, we didn't have any more storms that happened. And then this year too, you have to add in all the problems we had April 13th with the computer crash. That had a significant bearing on our budget. So if we had had an April storm where we're already have expended the public works budget, now we've had a cyber attack that took significant resources from the town. You're looking at something that's causing a perfect storm. Yes, it's very possible that it could be a one-off, but we didn't have any way to protect ourselves other than taking money out of the UFB.
So with this particular item, if you know, are you getting, am I getting the sense that you're in favor of this or opposed to this?
There's actually three questions here. The concept of creating a reserve fund for storm activity, I think, is a sound concept. You know, if you look at the other towns and history around storms, how many times have we heard on radio and television, all these towns and cities that wipe out their salt budget by the end of February, and now what do we do? This covers that and helps levelize that, and I'm good with earmarking monies for those types of things. The second question then becomes, do you use that 17,200 to fund it, or do you say, look, we're gonna go do this in the future, but that 200 could go to Doug's generator?
I want to take some credit for the generator too. I've been pushing it longer than you have.
All right, the D and K generator, okay, that's a possibility. And then the third part again is, which we haven't gotten into heavy-duty lifting on yet, is the salt shed, but
Right.
that one's pretty straightforward, I think.
I mean, we could look at when the other money comes back, when we get another disbursement from the state, we can talk about this again.
Well, then
at that
maybe
point.
we agree to do that, we say, I mean, just to move things along here.
Just so it's started.
Say, the 26 grand go back into the salt shed as proposed. The 17.2 go to the generator, and that a reserve fund for storm activity in the public works world is created, not yet funded, but created, at which point any of the other monies that we expect to come in land there, as opposed to the general fund or the UFB.
I agree with that approach.
I like the approach. The only thing I would suggest is that we know the generator came in over budget, but I think we should still tackle the process of making sure that we right-size the generator for
Right.
what we need, and so
Right.
if we need an extra.
We're working on that.
Let's just say for the sake of argument that the generator requires $14,000 more than the budget, then the leftover 3,000 could go into that
Could
reserve
go
account.
be the seed
Right.
money for the reserve for
Yeah.
storm
So,
activity.
but I think that, I like that approach.
As well as the 6,000 or so that we expect.
Yeah, and that's coming in later, would go into that
That
account.
could go into
We'd have,
the
when we
reserve,
receive
too.
that money, we'd have to vote again to put it in that reserve account.
You
And-
could state that any money coming from MEMA from the October 2017 storm could just automatically, then you wouldn't have to
Go into that
vote on
reserve
it.
account.
Okay.
I think that's good.
But, you know, and then we could decide during budget time, do we fund that reserve on an
Yeah,
annual
what
basis
level,
or
at
whatever?
what level
Right.
do we fund it? yeah.
That kind of thing.
And then,
All right.
when you're making deposits, you guys will make those determinations yourselves.
All right, so what do we need to do so that Megan can do what she needs to do?
So the first step would be to state that 17,000 whatever would first be applied to the town generator. Any remaining funds could go to the reserve account.
But we'd have to, we have to create the reserve account first.
You do have to create the reserve
Yeah,
account,
and
We need, for that, we need the statement, and we need the cap on it. and the
which
same-
we'll have to update the
funding.
reserve policy for
Yeah.
that.
Do you need us to do that tonight, or can you come back next month with those motions?
We can come back with that, but we didn't want to,
Yeah. I think
us
that would be
through the warrant.
wise, rather than at this late hour trying to craft the motions and then getting them wrong, and then.
We can get that
So,
taken care of.
as long as it's the sense of the board, and I just, the
Okay.
chair, I guess.
But the question is, we've already received, can we agree on what we think that 17.2 ought to go to? Because
would
we
be
can
helpful.
move money, if there's a balance out of that, we can move that into the reserve another time, right?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But that could be a straightforward one, that way generator activity gets going
We can
now.
Yeah,
continue.
because it's the storm
Right.
season.
All right, and it's paid for now.
And because you're not putting any money, you're not designating any money to a reserve account at this time, you can say that that 17,000 can be put into a temporary holding account for the town office
All right.
generator, and then the 26,000 can be put into a temporary holding account for the salt
Let
shed.
me try this. We won't go after the reserve fund. Let me make a motion here on these. Motion that the sum of $17,276.72 that was received from FEMA already be put into a temporary
Holding account.
holding account to be earmarked for the purposes of assisting in funding the proposed generator for the town office, and that any balances be held in that same temporary holding account until such further time proper use is determined.
Is there a second?
Did you
Second.
repeat that?
No. But now I can.
Second,
I heard it and it was good. I guess the question is, did Linda get it?
Well, we always have the tape.
Yep.
Okay.
No, that was good.
Yeah, it ought to be entertaining.
Any further discussion?
Who seconded
yes, I
Deborah
second
did.
it.
Okay, all
All
in
right.
favor? The vote's unanimous.
Let me make the next one if I could, on the 26th. I motion that the $25,944.75 that was received from the state of Maine for the construction of our salt shed that we built in 1987 be applied to the salt shed repair activity currently needed in order to preserve the longevity of that building for the foreseeable future.
Temporary holding account.
Into a temporary holding, does it need to go in a temporary?
Yeah,
Yes,
good.
that's what she
Okay.
said.
We don't have an estimate of the total cost. yet.
All right, so to add the sentence that it be placed in a temporary holding account for such purposes, as earlier stated.
Is there a
Second.
second? Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Was there a third? No, I guess that
Not
takes
yet.
care of it, because we'll
Not
come
yet.
back
Yeah.
later
Come
to
back with a
create the
proposal.
reserve fund. Okay. Thank you, Megan. I'm sorry for having you here so late tonight. I appreciate it. Item K, discuss Rockport Representative Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation. I had to resign from that committee. It's a very important committee. There's a lot of big things that are happening now with it, but, I simply did not have the time to dedicate to it. Owen is our other representative from the town of Rockport. Traditionally, someone on the select board has been on that committee. It can be a sort of a political committee because there's 4 different towns that are involved. Owen has volunteered to seek out someone in the community who may have the interest, the time, and the knowledge to serve on that, but I certainly didn't want to give him the go-ahead without discussing this at the board level. I mean, I think it probably would be preferable to find a board member that could be on that committee and give it the time that it needed. Rick, do you want to just add anything?
Yeah, it's kind of a challenging thing with that committee because what we've seen is the board has changed with each election, and it is a complex committee, and there's a lot going on, and having consistency of somebody that's going to be on that committee for a period of years is very helpful to that group, because having it change with every election
Right.
really throws us off. So when we really got a lot more done was in the days when we had 2 board members, it was Tracy and Bill, sat on that committee for a number of years, several terms. And, you know, so there was consistency, and we weren't reinventing the wheel every time. What they're struggling with is changeover every year and having to bring the new board members up to speed with all of the stuff that's going on. And so the idea of getting either a board member that's willing to serve for a number of years or finding a resident that's willing to serve for a number of years, like Owen. I mean, Owen understands, he's been on that committee for a number of years, I think two, and he's chair now.
He's actually the longest, he's been on for he was on the select board for 3 years, and he was on that committee almost from when he, well,
Yeah, I think he was.
probably only 2 years, because I think the first year he was on the board, Tracy was still on the board, and it was Bill and Tracy.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
So I
right.
think Owen's only been on that board 2 years, but he is
He's
the
the longest.
longest-serving member on that board right now. That tells you what the term, of course, they had a couple of members die, which didn't help, unfortunately. So the consistency there is important, especially with the issues, and Owen was good enough to come to our,
Right,
our meeting last
right.
month and talk to us about
Right.
that, and he has a solid grasp of the
does.
issues there, and he's into the garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we reached out to Bill Chapman.
Bill Chapman, yes.
And Bill, although he has not said yes, he would do it, he did agree to go to the next meeting and sort of sit in and get a sense of.
See if he wants to put his foot
if
back
you-
in the
yeah,
water.
So that's a possibility, but again.
And I would say, I had talked to Tracy Murphy a long time ago, who also served on that board for a long time, and she has a strong interest in, I haven't talked to her recently, but I would have to ask her again, but she at one time indicated a possibility of perhaps rejoining that board as well.
Unless somebody on the board wants to do it, and I would not volunteer, I think that going that route, and getting somebody in the community, if we can do that, would be great.
The issue is that there is a fiduciary responsibility there for the town, and so I think
Right.
if we do that, I had a chat with Owen about this, and I said, if we go that route, I think we will have to ask the representative of that committee to come and see us on a fairly frequent basis, maybe
least
once every
quarterly.
other month
Sure.
or
To
something
give
like
it
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least
Yep.
quarterly.
So that we get that, because right now we would get it in liaison reports, and we would be the only town, I believe, that didn't have any select board members on
Yeah.
the board of directors.
But the one good news is each of the town managers and town administrator are on the executive committee of this board. I mean, there's some issues behind that, but at least there is some consistency that Audra attends and David attends and Rick attends and,
Yeah,
Right.
it was helpful for us when we had Tracy and Bill on. It made the conversations and the discussions a lot easier when they were both on, because they knew the information inside and out. So it was only a matter of bringing 3 board members up to speed. But the good news is, a lot of that heavy lifting stuff that we went through with Fiberite is done.
That was the
That was
controversial
very
thing. There's still a
controversial.
lot of heavy lifting to
There's
do.
a lot of heavy
heavy lifting to
Right,
do. A lot
yeah,
of money
Owen-
is coming in
yeah.
and out and things like
Yeah.
that, but the controversy, we
controversial
hope,
stuff.
for the time being, is behind us,
Right.
which, that made it a very difficult period for that board.
I think Owen did a good presentation at the
Yeah, he
last
did.
meeting on that.
Yeah.
well, so, and again, I apologize to my fellow board members for putting us through this, but, so shall we wait to see how Bill responds? Okay.
We can do that. Does anybody want me to reach
Oh,
out to
well, I
Tracy
think
again
as
as well? or-
yeah, I would think as a backup, because we have no idea what Bill's gonna say, but at least make her aware that.
That there would,
If
and
that-
I'm assuming we didn't hear, I mean, it makes no sense for me to join that board where I have less than a year left in my term. That doesn't help the turnover.
Unless you wanted to stick around for another.
That doesn't, it makes more sense at that point to have a community member who has more experience with it than I do to do it. And I'm not hearing anybody jumping forth from this end of the table saying that they wanna. It's a big time.
Well, maybe Tracy could go to the meeting with Bill together. They know each other
See,
pretty well.
When is the meeting? Is it?
Tomorrow night.
There you go.
Right
point,
at,
Surprise!
I'm not gonna, I'm
It's-
not gonna have time to reach out to her until next week probably, but I will reach out to her and see if she has an interest.
All right. The next item is to discuss the budget committee. It's getting late and I've sort of forgotten. I think just the issue is that we're losing people fairly rapidly on that committee. Is that what this is about?
We're down 3 members now.
Yeah, so,
I thought we did,
But you will see at the next
one.
Yeah, that's
next
what I
meeting,
thought.
Jeff Charland will submit his application to be on the Budget Committee. He's been on the CIP Committee for a couple of years. He's a local banker, and as he said, he loves budgets. So,
Good.
and it says in our manager's notes that Linda would tell us what our options are for replacement, because those are elected positions, so.
but they,
You know, one of the.
When can we appoint and when do we have to have a special election?
I believe you could appoint now if you so choose, or we can have a special election, because I would have to have time to do nomination papers, and that's 100 days.
And, you know, Bill had asked and mentioned, he was a little disappointed that there wasn't anything on the November ballot, knowing that we had a vacancy back in July or whenever one of the first ones came about.
yeah, it came to the board a while ago, and the board didn't take any
Yeah,
action.
no, and that's my fault, our fault,
yeah.
but it was a slip-up, so.
But the question is, any appointment the board made would be for just until the next.
the next election.
Correct, Linda?
Term,
Right.
whatever the term is that would be.
Oh, can we fill the entire unexpired term,
That's correct, whatever the term is that would be.
even if there's another election?
Coming up.
Most of them are in June anyway.
Oh, okay, that's right, too. We did look at that. Most of them are, their term was due to expire in June.
Chris and I went on same
Yeah,
time.
he's been 2 years.
Yeah, we're in our second year now, so his would be
Yeah, yours says expires June 2019, so his is the same time, right?
19, yep.
So, I guess we can't force anybody to do it, but obviously, I guess the whole point here is if any of us have friends or family that would be interested in this, and for the new select board people, it's a fairly short period of time, but it's quite intense once we get going.
Right.
Excuse me.
And
And Joyce,
It's a great way to get
Being a tax
involved in
person.
town, you know, to learn about the town and things like that. So if there are folks out there who are thinking they'd like to be involved with the town in one way, shape, or form, this is a great place to start. You learn an awful lot about the town, as Doug says, in a fairly short and intense period of time, and then you
Yeah,
get to
it's-
relax until the next season rolls around.
It is one committee that you can get on, and the commitment is limited in time. It's intense, but it's limited in time. So you get your work done, and then it's pretty laid back the rest of the year.
Okay.
all right, now we'll go on to liaison reports.
So, but we
Yeah, I'm sorry.
really didn't answer some of the questions, because we could have a special election, or I guess did we,
You'd have to get somebody to want to run.
Yeah,
no, but that's
first-
what I'm saying, have we given, we're just gonna wait until next June and,
Well, no,
thought we were
I
gonna
think,
appoint
Try and
somebody.
find,
I think if we can get people to express interest and fill out a committee application at this point, because we have so many vacancies, I
Yeah.
think that my opinion, that would be, if we had only one vacancy, then I might say, well, let's put it out there and have nomination papers and go the special election route, but I think where we have so many vacancies, it would behoove us to get people interested to sign up and.
Yeah, and why do an election if someone wants to volunteer,
May I?
you know?
Right, and isn't that where we were before? Isn't that why we didn't go that route? And we were supposed to be looking for people? I mean, I thought that's when it was brought up before. I think that we were looking for people who might be interested, I thought.
Yeah. I just don't recall. But it's an urgent issue for us as a board
Yeah.
to think about, and,
well, I mean,
yeah.
looking at the tally sheet from June of 18, there were a number of write-ins.
Yeah, but I think the ones that were all one vote, I think, were the ones who got past the ones who actually are on.
Well, I mean, Peter Johnston's a former one that had a couple of write-ins, Bill Chapman, Tracy Murphy. Owen obviously is there because he had the most and wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But,
Well, let's see who we
John
can
Duke.
dredge up.
John Duke, you said?
Yeah, he's on there as a
One
write-in.
vote or something.
Yeah, he can't.
Two.
Oh, because he's a town manager,
because
isn't he?
he's town manager,
Yeah.
Or he's not supposed to.
Okay, let's go to liaison reports. Take it, someone.
Harbor Committee.
Oh, okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. My harbor came out the same time your did. Harbor Committee, we talked about several of the most recent activities, the two exceptions that were reviewed and went through the process for the first time, using the exception policy now outlined in the ordinance. Current activity is around putting together proposals for rate schedules for next year. And that has to be done sometime here in November before we get it in front of the select board for review and budget season. That's the big stuff right now.
ZBA has not met, ORC has not met. I've talked to Bill Napower about both of those committees, and he has a couple of issues for ORC. It looks like it may be a light season for ORC, which is actually probably good because it might allow them to spend a little more time just looking at the ordinance in general and trying to find some issues and do some more of the stuff that we did last year, which was talking about density and cleaning up some inconsistencies in the ordinance, things like that. At some point, there'll have to be a workshop, that'll be a select board workshop where we go over the issues that Bill has. One of them he talked about was cell phone towers, where we have, he says with the 5G system or whatever, we're gonna need more cell phone towers in town to cover and so we have to look at the ordinance and decide where we wanna have those and things like that. There's already some provisions in there, but his thought when he talked to me about it was there probably aren't enough places where we can put them in town to provide the coverage that the citizens will want. So at any rate, he'll get back to me soon about that, and we'll probably have to schedule a workshop, and then ORC will start their season, my guess is maybe not till December. If it's a short season, maybe not till the first of the year, we'll see. ZBA has not met, has not had to meet, they don't have a chair right now. Their bylaws are in need of revision, so all that stuff, even though there are no issues coming up, I told Bill that we probably should get a meeting together at some point so that we can at least take care of the bylaws and get a chair elected so that if something comes up, that we'll have it. Cemetery has not met since the last time we were together.
Meeting in November.
We do have a meeting in November, and the columbarium idea is moving forward there, but we haven't met since last time, so nothing new there. Legacy Rockport met last week. I was out of town, so I missed it. I did get the minutes, and they're looking at a new way to be able to accept online donations because the GoFundMe option has gone away, basically because GoFundMe won't do nonprofits anymore. Anyway, they changed their rules and things like that, but some of the projects in town where people might want to donate online, Legacy Rockport wants to have that ability to accept those donations, and we're looking at a couple of different ways to do that. One is called Stripe, I guess, and another one is reading from the minutes that I got last week from the First National Bank of Damascus, I guess, has a program where they can help us with that, so.
There's also something that's called QGive. QGive.
Okay,
Have you
I'm
been
not
familiar
familiar with that, but.
Well, I'm the president of the board for the Penobscot Bay Ringers, and that's how we're doing our donation system is through QGive.
Well, it's good,
and so
that's
it's
how we
worked out.
found out about Stripe, because that's what United Mid-Coast Charities uses, and so we're finding out, and I did a little research online on it, and it was like, no, there were some complaints about it. It's not necessarily, like GoFundMe was specifically to fund causes, so to speak, whereas Stripe was really a payment clearinghouse where you could accept credit cards for all purposes if you're a business or a nonprofit.
Yeah, and I might be wrong, but I believe I think QGive really focuses on nonprofits.
Okay.
But it's
Could you
worth
pop me an email
checking-
with,
sure.
with that information? That'd be
Yep.
great, that'd be really helpful. Ambulance review, I did a doodle poll the other day for a meeting for that. I don't know whether that's been scheduled yet or not.
And I said to Diane, I'm out of town.
Oh, for the whole time, all the dates we selected?
I'm gone from the 9th of November through the 25th.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So anyway, I put my name in for
Okay.
that, so we'll see when that comes up, and that's all I have.
If I could do a quick redo. Harbor Committee, there's been a couple committees that have been meeting around polystyrene bans and those types of things, particularly associated with floats. Harbor Committee, another committee, Parks and Parks Committee, rather. And there's a lot of work going on in that regard, primarily around information collection, research, data collection, et cetera.
Do you want to talk about RES? Or any of that?
Actually, I wasn't
Broadband?
going to,
Oh,
but we
okay.
can if
Yeah,
you want to.
well.
Do you have any other committee report?
You know, broadband, we mentioned broadband earlier, and that's not really a committee at this point. It's really, you know, we're doing a lot of meetings to get more information, as I said, from a financing standpoint. We've had some meetings with the Economic Development Committee in Camden, reached out to a couple of other towns just to kind of gauge level of interest. And when we have our ducks in a row, we'll bring that back to the select board. But we have been active.
Okay.
And the other thing is, again, while I've been working with you, Doug, on some economic development efforts, the other thing, even though it's not a committee, is that I've spent days and days on rewriting the internal control policy draft. So while I haven't had a lot of committee meetings, I've been devoting tons of time to
Oh,
that,
yeah,
which
and-
is, we're having the workshop
Yeah,
on
we
soon,
appreciate that.
so.
The Capital Improvement Committee met last week. They've talked about increasing the dollar value from 5,000 to 25,000 as far as what they review, which gets rid of some of the smoke so you can see the fire. They're gonna review those items and get back to us with their updated numbering priority listing for those.
Yeah, that's a pretty big change, and, you know, the select board's gonna have to approve that. I'm personally in favor of it, but just, it's an important
Yeah.
change.
And I would add too, that I think we've discussed that before, and Megan may have some input on that, because there are some definitions through that with the whole GRFA thing that, I agree with the premise of it, but I think we have to be a little careful about making that change if it falls afoul of some guidelines.
Yeah, I think I don't think it will, as long as, it doesn't mean that it's not part of the plan, it just means that the Capital Improvement Committee may not be weighing in and prioritizing those. Those will be just budgeted.
And I think
It'll
that's-
be part of our budget process, but planning, in capital improvement planning. But it means that the CIP committee will not be weighing in on those things.
And as far as the Parks Committee, I just remembered I had the notes from that. Let me see here. Reference Clam Cove Park, in other words, Glen Cove Park. They did say that they would, they do want to keep the park. They talked about keeping it, turning it back to the state, or closing it and letting it go back to nature. Dave Jackson made a motion, seconded by Sadie, to keep Clam Cove Park only if it can be upgraded and maintained, and their inclusion of what needs to be, to include structures, brush, tree removal, and those types of things for maintenance. So, anyway, they're sort of.
That's the motion I was looking for.
Yep. And that, we were there, Doug and I were there, and we urged the committee to come with a specific list of items that they wanted to see included in the upcoming budget.
You'll sign it.
And have dollar factors so that, dollar numbers so that they could put them in there for Mike's presentation to us. And uniform park bench policy discussion, it was decided Dave would get a price for smaller benches created by Weather End, and I think they're gonna be looking to us to have, for us to tell them how many benches we want down there, if I remember correctly, Doug, but
Did they come up with a recommended bench?
type of, yeah,
Oh,
no,
good.
they were looking at the, it's a Weather End type of bench.
Oh, okay, I missed that part.
Heisted design?
Jackson style, Weather End Jackson style.
Oh, good.
Okay, yeah. But it's about $2,600 per bench. So, and, that's about the extent of it. Oh, let's not forget dog poop, I didn't scroll far enough. They said that the select board should authorize the police to provide more, authorize the police to be more involved, and also for the town to put up more bins for proper disposal, particularly down around our more traveled areas of Beauchamp. And that's it.
Just a brief add-on to what Mark said about those benches. They do run about $2,500 each, but the beauty of it is that the ones that are memorial benches, you then turn around and typically you can ask people to make a donation of around $8,000. So even though there's a little upfront cost, it still would be not a money loser. The first thing, and I want people to pay attention to this, is the library committee. I didn't make the last meeting, but Heaven was kind enough to have coffee with me and sort of update me. I guess one of the big topics that they're working on right now is the library committee endowment. Basically, there's around $800,000 in there that the library committee's real job is to be trustees of that endowment. There has been some question with the town auditor over sort of who manages that money. Helen Shaw was kind enough to go back and do a very nice written history of how this endowment came to be and the various iterations it's been through, and I'll make it a point to get that to all of us before the next meeting. At some point, I think this is going to come to a head, and what I'm not sure about is whether or not it's going to be a legal decision, that this is something that's been decided in the past sort of by law, or if it's going to come down to the select board making a policy decision. And I don't know the answer to that, but it's something I think with the upcoming audit and the auditors here, I think we're going to be faced with it sooner rather than later. And I would ask Rick, did I misstate anything, or?
I think that's been the issue of the struggle. The challenge is we've tried to have our feet in two boats, and what the auditor is saying is we have to take our feet out of both boats and pick one boat to put our feet. It's pretty clear from the history that you'll get from Helen, and Tracy did a lot of work on that as well, that the voters were pretty clear that they wanted that endowment to be separate from the town. So I think what they're working on is trying to get their own 501c3 status, so then they can take care of, because it was brought over more under the town to give them the protection of the 501c3. And so they'll have to have their own audit done, and they'd have their own 501c3.
Is the select board going to be asked to have to weigh in on this at some point, or
I
not?
think it would have to, because right now, technically speaking, those funds belong to the town, the way I understand it. They're controlled by the decisions of the library committee, but they are in town accounts.
They're in town accounts.
And so they, technically speaking, belong to the town.
And
Now,
that-
Rick is right, there was a town meeting vote, I don't know when
It
it was.
was very
back in-
contentious in the 80s.
It was a very
Yes.
close vote.
No, I
but it
vaguely
was,
remember
it was,
something.
It was very contentious.
The selectmen recommended against the vote, and the town voted for it anyway, but anyway, the town voted, so that's the end of it, is that the library committee controls that money, and to this date, they still control the money. I think the issue with the auditors is that they don't like the way it's accounted for.
You know, as Steve Beveridge would say, if you want a little history, go check with Paul Gibbons, because he was the attorney at the time, and he may be able to help you, if you should.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't think there's any question about the fact that the library committee controls those funds. At least I don't have any question about that personally. I think it's just a matter of best accounting practices, which may be different now than they were
Yeah.
25, 30 years ago.
Well, I think, again, we're not up for discussion per se tonight, but I think people can see that there's some murky areas and it's a lot of money involved, so just want to give you a heads up. Rockport Beautification Program, Gretchen Leone was elected chair of that project. That group, they met today and are going to start identifying some projects they would like to advance into the budget through the Department of Public Works for the upcoming year. Finance Committee had its annual meeting today with Bar Harbor Banking and Trust to review,
Is that investment committee?
Investment.
Investment Committee, I'm sorry, the Investment Committee had its annual meeting today with Bar Harbor Banking and Trust. Again, I was impressed with the process we have in place. We have, good people on that asked all the right questions of this group. Our money seems to be well invested, and again, I was reassured by the process.
So is that the first meeting of the investment committee for a while? Because-
Yes, it had been quite a while that we were struggling with getting people together, and the bylaws actually had to be rewritten so that there's just an annual meeting, but there's also an agreement that Megan will send out monthly reports from Bar Harbor Banking and Trust to all the members of the committee, such that if anything needs discussion, special meetings can be called, and that seems to fit everyone's schedule.
And you had a quorum today.
Yeah.
You had a lively meeting, it sounded like.
No, it was just an excellent meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I
very
think it
good
was,
questions
there
were
was,
asked,
yeah, there were. It was, because I can hear through
They
the.
weren't asked by me, but.
No. It sounded like a really good discussion.
It was. Okay, any call for an executive session?
Already had it. I guess we had it.
Hearing none,
It's
hear a
blend
motion
together.
for adjournment.
So motion, we adjourn.
Excellent. Listen, guys, this was a good meeting tonight. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed the fact the Red Sox are now ahead.
Oh,
I got a text from my son saying, "That's a great start," because I couldn't look it up, see what it is.
I cheer for